right. Well, good morning, everyone. Several of you, I've had myself echoing in there. Be careful. Several of you have had as students or current students of mine. So, hello. Quickly, yes, all of those things were true. But I like to tell students that I have not just lived in academics my entire life. I had a whole career in the real world, quote unquote, prior. So I worked in marketing and communications for at least 15 years before I went into academics, and predominantly in the healthcare marketing industry. So I am from Minnesota. It always comes out when I say Minnesota, and other things as well. It's a cute, unique thing about me. I have a master's of health administration. Due to that, I also have an MBA, and then I have a PhD. So I have worked everything from being a lowly intern at agencies and everything that many of the undergrads are living and learning right now, all the way being into senior executive roles in the marketing corporate realm. And I've worked in agencies as well. I've been the director of market research for Omnitrack, which is a local research firm. And I still consult for companies today. I still work out kind of in the field, but predominantly I teach and I work with graduates and undergraduates. So that's about me. Now, let's talk about today. Just want to make sure we're kind of moving. We started a few minutes late. Told you about myself. We are going to go through, we're going to recap slightly what was done very quickly in Bootcamp 1. So we're sort of all on the same page. And then we're going to move into channels, key partners, key activities, key resources, the cost structure. We're going to take a break. And then we'll do revenue streams and unit economics. So we're going to cover a lot of things today. So quickly, I'm just curious, how many of you are in doing the competition right now, or actively? They made it through round 2. Congratulations to all of you guys. Excited? Should be excited. Yeah. Absolutely. And no, I have worked with PACE for many, many years. I've taught entrepreneurial marketing, which is marketing 372. If you guys have never taken it, it's a great class. I'm not currently teaching it, but it is a great class nonetheless. So we have amazing marketing professors. But I have also mentored different teams in the competitions. I have been a judge. I've done all kinds of things. So I'm very, very familiar with the PACE program and what they do. So also know at any time, at the end, you'll see I have my email. My current students can tell you I am very easily accessible. Feel free, reach out. If you have questions, I'm happy to chat. You can ask me anything. Okay, so let's do a quick review. In Bootcamp 1, you guys kind of talked about the lean methodology. So in short, right, the lean methodology is about iteration. Oh, and I want to make a note. My slides today are really text heavy. They are the cardinal example of what you never want slides to look like. But I did that very specifically. I did it because I will make them available to you. Let me see if I can move this annoying little doodad so it's not in your way. I did it very specifically. I'll give you access to these because you know, when we're in a class and we're learning throughout a semester, we can have those high-level slides because we're talking through things, we're taking our time, you can ask questions, we can come back and see it again the next class, all of these things. But in a boot camp, it's kind of one and done. And so I wanted you to have slides that if you wanted to come back and do something, you have all of the information and it's a resource. So that's why they're so text heavy. But okay, so lean methodology, it's really all about the iterative process, right? Lean methodology is saying, we're not going to say, oh, I found this amazing concept. I've come up with this great idea. It's sold, it's done, let's move. No, it's, you know what, it's a good idea, but there's always room for improvement. I can constantly improve until I've got something that's great out in the market, but then I'm going to keep it moving, right? So it's just constant improvement. You guys worked on identifying who your customers were and what your value proposition is. And your value proposition, right, is how you sell yourself to the customer, what you can promise them. Do you want to give me an example of a value proposition or what they maybe came up with? Oh, don't all raise your hands at once. I'm get excited. Convenience, that can absolutely be a value proposition. How about, let me ask you this. If you had to guess, what do you think Nike's value proposition is? I always like to use Nike. It's a brand most people are aware of. If you had to guess, what is their value proposition?
Like name value?
Absolutely. The brand itself is a value proposition to them. Now we can't from the beginning because you have to build that, but 100% their brand is part of their value proposition.
I say initially it was like the technology, how they got this, how they started, how they like the shoe dog, right? Like what I talked about, how they came up with like the unique technologies that haven't been like invented or tried. So
absolutely, yeah. So innovation is a huge part of their value proposition. They're the ones that came up with putting air in the soles. And I can tell you a whole story about Nike Air, but I won't get into that today. Also, they would stress customization and accessibility as well as part of their value proposition. Right, so we can think about that. If you're having a hard time with your concepts and what is my value proposition, sometimes looking at brands that you really aspire to or you want to emulate and thinking about what is their value proposition, what can align, can help you start down that track of what do I want my company to look like? What is the value proposition that I want to provide my customers? Then the minimally viable product, the MVP. So remember, back to the lean methodology being iterative, MVP is also iterative. And I'll give you an example from my own experience. So when I worked at Kapi'olani Medical Center for many, many years, and we launched, while I was there, an app for pregnant mothers. And so this app, as you can imagine, it's one of those, it's much like there were several out on the market that the mainland had, but you could track like how far along you were in your pregnancy, and it would tell you like, oh, your baby's the size of an apple today, and this is what the baby's learning, and this is how it's developing, all these different things. Now, we decided we wanted our own app, and not just to say, oh, use this mainland organization, because one, Kapi'olani is sort of known as that center for information and knowledge about children. And also we wanted to provide that local aspect. So instead of saying your baby's the size of an apple, maybe it's your baby's the size of a mango. I know it's sort of a little kind of small thing, but we did those things to make it more local and tailored to Oahu, right? Now, back to the MVP, when we first started, what we literally did was we worked with a graphic designer and we mocked up pages. So just physical pages about what that app might look like. So we didn't spend any time doing, coding or creating the app. We first just came up with the concept, and then we went to our customers and said, hey, here's an image for you. Here's a thought process. We're going to walk you through, give you some images to kind of give you an idea. What do you think? And started getting feedback. That was our first MVP. And as we got positive feedback, it was like, okay, now we're going to start coding. So then we created a first beta version, and then we had more consumers come in, and they, this is way back in the day where you couldn't load a beta version onto anyone's phone. So they had to come in and use these phones that we had. They had to use our phones. And, but they walked through, and we heard their, missteps, their concerns, all of this. So that MVP changes too. MVPs are iterative as well. So remember that. Now your market sizing is important. How much of your market? Who are they? How big are they? What's the viability of them? And then interviewing. You guys spent some time talking about interviewing and creating interview guides. Now, we know that's qualitative research. Qualitative research is really valuable. I know in the research world, we have very much the quant and the qual people, right? And people who are on the quantitative side, like, it's all about the numbering, it's all about the numbers. And people in the qual say, we gotta get deep, we gotta learn, we want to marry both of them. In the marketing world, we want to see both. As an entrepreneur, qualitative research is wonderful because it's easily accessible. It's not necessarily realistic as an entrepreneur when you're wearing 100 different hats and you have a very limited time and budget to say, I'm going to go launch major surveys. I'm going to do all of this research. No, it's really impossible. It's hard. You only have so many hours in a day. So doing interviews can give you a lot of breadth and depth. But what you can do, if you don't have that time to do those surveys, is try to pair it with some secondary research, right? And secondary research doesn't have to be exhaustive, but what are the trends out in the world? And I talk with a lot of my students all the time about environmental scanning. And environmental scanning is about being aware about the current event in the world at all times, right? And how that might impact. I like to, we don't need to get ridiculous about like the butterfly effect, if you will, but knowing what's going on and how might that influence my customer base, how might that change my market size, all of these different things is really critical, right? Think about, of course, inflation rate is something that's really visible to us at this moment. How is that going to potentially impact my customer base? And how is that potentially going to impact the launch of my company or my organization or it moving forward? If we roll back not too long ago, of course, that conversation would be about COVID-19. And there's always stuff going on, right? Locally and nationally and globally that we do want to be aware of. So if you were sort of environment scanning, right, and kind of knowing what's going on in the current world, that kind of helps you understand and is almost like a secondary research source, right? You can also do some Googling. We also love to Google, see what the trends are. And then product market fit. Sometimes we have a great idea and we think everyone's going to love it, but it doesn't always work. There's so many examples. Can anyone think of an example of a product that came out that had terrible product market fit and just failed? Because there's plenty of big companies that have done it.
Like the Google Glasses?
Well, Google Glasses is a great example, right? Conceptually, amazing, right? Oh, forward thinking, inventive. Everybody wants Google Glasses, but they didn't really understand the product. They didn't really understand the consumer's understanding, and it flopped. Now we know eventually it's going to come back around, right? We are going to start seeing those soon in a different form because the consumer is ready for it and they refined that product. But that's a great example. Any others? How about New Coke? You might not remember New Coke because that was like the late 80s, early 90s. Conceptually, they probably could have been fine with New Coke, but it was that they didn't take the time to understand and to teach the consumer that this was not like another product, right? If Coke was going to come out with New Coke as a extension, a product extension, it probably would have worked out. But they posed it as a replacement for Coca-Cola. And that's where that product market fit failed because nobody wanted you to take away their Coke. No, that was, no, why would you take that away from me, right? So you have to understand that product market fit. It's very, very important. Okay. Now let's look at the business. Oh, I suppose I could try this. No, it doesn't like it. Oh, it's confusing. Now, you guys talked about the business model. This is the image, right? Remember, this is like your 500-foot view of your business plan. Right? If you can have these different pockets all filled out, you have a pretty good understanding about what you want to do and how you want to move forward. Now, in the last boot camp, you guys, let's see. Get rid of it. I can't. Sorry. So you guys spent a lot of time on value proposition, customer relationships, and customer segments, the red highlighted ones. And those are really critical. You can't move forward if you don't know what your value proposition is, who you're trying to target, and how you're trying to target them, right? How we're going to segment them out. Today, we're going to go through a little bit more functional resources, like key partners, key activities, key resources. We're going to talk about those channels, the cost structure, and the revenue streams. So we're going to fill out the rest of this business campus. All right, so channels. Channels is essentially all about how a company communicates with its identified customer segments. So we think about this really in the customer journey. So I'll show you in a second. The 5 distinct phases are honestly the customer journey. And how am I interacting with my customer at every point within that journey? Now, channels can be something that I own, or a partner owns, right? And they can be both direct and indirect. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So your 5 phases, and know that in marketing, business, sometimes we use slightly different names for these different phases, but they all ultimately mean the same thing. So I'm using the terms of awareness, evaluation, purchase, delivery, and after sales in this example. So awareness, how do I get the consumer to know about my product? Right, the first step is awareness. They don't know about it, they're not coming. And then there is an evaluation process. Now note, sometimes these processes move very quickly, right? If it's a small decision-making type of product, I might move from awareness to evaluation in the matter of moments, in seconds. If it's a larger purchase, this might be a longer period of time. So perhaps the decision of, if I'm going to try a new type of cereal, for example, I might move from awareness, evaluation, and purchase within a couple of seconds. If I'm thinking about buying a car, this could be a series of days, months, even years, potentially, depending on what my buying cycle is, right? So how am I interacting with you at the awareness moment? How am I helping you evaluate my product over competitors and why you should, and giving you that leverage and that information, so why you should pick me over my competitor. And then when you do purchase, there's an interaction point. Afterwards, delivery is that moment of, now that I have it, right, now that I've received it, and sometimes there's that delay, right? Maybe the purchase is online and I have to wait for the product to come. Maybe it's via email, maybe it's a mobile delivery, but there's sometimes that delay in purchase and delivery. So how does that interaction look? And then after sales, how do I bring about loyalty? How do I continue to communicate with you to encourage you to purchase again, to come back, to retain that consumer? Because as we know, it is much less expensive to retain and have a returning consumer come and purchase more than to constantly acquire a new consumer. It is much more costly, right? So here's just some examples. Give it a little bit more detail or thought, and you can think about your own. So your channels, as I mentioned, could be owned or partnered. So your owned channels, a direct one could be your website, your social media accounts, advertising. Partner might be the use of an intermediary. Perhaps you're utilizing a wholesaler or a retailer. So like Target, Costco, anything like that to house your product. And so, for example, awareness. What are we going to do with awareness? What do you think? How am I going to promote awareness of a product? What do we go to? What's our go-to?
A lot of people use Instagram and Facebook Marketplace to advertise.
Social media is certainly a very prominent platform for awareness now. We have a lot of campaigns that really focus on social media, and it'll depend on your age, right? The age of your consumer as to what you're looking at. I like to tell my undergrads that they do need to have a Facebook account, because there are consumers still on Facebook, and we do still advertise to people on Facebook if they're the right demographic. So they do need to be familiar with it. Even though traditionally most undergrads at this age are not utilizing Facebook themselves. So yeah, social media will be another one.
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth is huge. So we can do digital word of mouth. That might be through what? What's the most common digital word of mouth? Messaging, but also let's think of one type of reference in particular. Influencer marketing. Right? Influencer marketing, that's actually a huge digital word of mouth. If you think about it, we've just monetized word of mouth that way, because maybe if I'm like, let's say I'm a mom influencer, I'm not, but we can pretend for a minute. you might not know me personally, right? But maybe you start following me because you like the things I say about, being a parent or whatever. And next thing you know, you start buying products that I might mention in my reels, and that is electronic word of mouth as well. So we've almost married and monetized electronic word of mouth through that influencer portal now.
I was gonna say, I don't know what it's called now, because I'm one of those older folks that are still on Facebook, or just 10 years later, I'm back on Facebook. But it's called Kickstarter, or these like platforms where you're able to maybe pitch a product or business before you're launching, and then that way you can like kind of spread the awareness and a lot of times get some money to order inventory and throw it out there.
Yes, there's a lot of platforms now, and yeah, Kickstarter is the biggest one. But there's, some of them. There's even some in like the nonprofit sector and things like that, where they're basically crowdsourcing platforms where you can pitch your concept and people can get behind you. So you're not only is it word of mouth, but you're also building a consumer base before you actually launch the product, and that consumer base is helping you launch the product. So those can be really interesting platforms for entrepreneurs to pursue. You just want to make sure that you understand all the rules and regulations, because some of them could have loopholes where you may inadvertently be having to shift offhand a lot of your potential profits to cover that cost of having that visibility, right? So you got to make sure you understand what you're doing before you move on to those platforms and agree to those terms. So just be aware, but they are great resources for entrepreneurial platforms. Also, something that's like digital advertising or traditional digital advertising, SEO. Does anybody know what's SEO?
Search engine optimization.
Search engine optimization, right? So any thoughts on how we do that?
It's the keywords.
Keywords, absolutely. It's absolutely keywords. It's metadata as well. The annoying thing with Google, we'll never know the exact recipe. So they have an algorithm, right, that identifies how, so search engine optimization is all about making my company come to the top, right, and of the search. And they will never tell you exactly what that recipe is to ensure the best ultimate thing. They never have. We have a lot of good ideas. It's all about utilizing the keywords that are important to you in your website, right? So embedded into the body of your web pages. It's about having multiple pages, connecting pages. You want to use the metadata. So that's the data we can't visibly see, right? That's behind the screen, right? But it's what the AI and algorithm will read. The metadata is important too. Even you have, for example, if you have images or video on your website, which of course we want to have, there are taglines that are embedded. Not predominantly, we see them mostly we think about them for people who are utilizing the website from like a site limited standpoint, so they can't see the image, but they can read, like, oh, image of, girl paddling on the ocean or whatever it is. Those are actually important. A lot of times websites leave those blank. They don't think about them. And so one, we want to implement that kind of stuff because it makes your website ADA compliant, which is important. That's a good Bible thing that you can promote, but also it increases your SEO. Because your AI and algorithm reads that and they're like, oh, it reinforces. So there's all these little things that we can do that raises it up. Now, some of the ways we can push it, we can create SEO ads. So we can pay Google to pop us up at the top for those sponsored placements. How many of you will click on the sponsored ads? Because it says sponsored, right? We know it is. How many of you clicked on those? Did you just not because you're like, nope?
We know they pay, so it's like
we know that. Interesting, right? There's kind of different rules of thought for that, but they definitely do support and help. So if you pay for SEO, if you're not, if you're way below the fold. So the fold is an old newspaper term. Below the fold, right? We think about an old paper, right? If I'm not on that top fold, I'm not. The chances of you seeing me is minimal. So we use that term even in digital today. If I have to scroll down to see my results, nobody else is seeing my results. How many of you will scroll down? How about go to the second page or the third page? Never, right? Yeah, so you don't want to be below the fold. So if that's the case, you pay for SEO, that will actually help increase and jump your organic results much faster. It's a devious plan by Google. But that, you know, gotta play the game. Now, evaluation, we can rely on a lot of the same tools. Social media, again, those influencers, all of those, because it's really pairing awareness and evaluation together. Because, you know, if I'm a mom influencer, for example, I'm not only exposing you to the product, I'm telling you how great it is. I'm giving you that evaluation. I'm providing that for you. Your website is another reference for this. Purchase itself, oftentimes now we're seeing e-commerce, right? You're buying digitally, or it can be in a retail store. So I might be utilizing partners like, you know, Target, Walmart. I'm just thinking of big boxes, but we can think about all the little stores too, and the independents out there, but I could be using them. And then that's a benefit of a halo effect of supporting other businesses. So for example, if I am familiar with Local Motion, and I like that surf store, I go in there, I'm going in there because of that brand is valuable to me, I know that it's strong, all this stuff, and I might see your product in there, and so immediately it's going to win from my feelings about Local Motion, right? It's going to benefit from the halo effect of how I feel about that store. So the halo effect can be very valuable to new businesses. You can also have that on the influencer standpoint as well, right? If I have an influencer who's telling me about a product I don't know about, I'm gonna more likely to buy it because of my feelings towards that influencer. If I feel, you know, that they're smart, you know what they're talking about, their brand is gonna have a halo effect on that product's brand. It's called a halo effect, yeah. Yes. I would like to use the example of Beyonce and Adidas, right? Beyonce did her collab, or continues to have her collab with Adidas, right? When it launched, it immediately sold out. And we can say that, well, because she's Queen Bee, I mean, who doesn't want to buy from Beyonce? But Beyonce, we can argue that Adidas really benefited from the halo effect of Beyonce's brand. Beyonce also may have benefited from Adidas's brand as well. There's a halo effect on both sides because they're both well-known brands, but we could argue that potentially Adidas had a better payoff than Beyonce. I mean, she did very well with her collab. The halo effect itself. Okay, we take a minute. Can I think about, like, what kind of channels are you guys thinking about? Have you thought at all about channels for your products? Have you considered? We're thinking mostly on a digital plane. Yeah.
Shopify.
Shopify is a great one. Shopify has a lot of, think about those are like point of sale product platforms, right? So you have a lot of ability to get metrics and you get data on what's going on and interaction. So there's a lot of ability to read the analytics side besides just push information out. Other thoughts? Haven't gotten there yet? Yeah.
What about if you keep like a physical product you can put in like a store or something?
Absolutely. So how do we put things in it? Does anyone know how you put things in a store? Can I just like call Target up and be like, hey, what's up? Put my how do we do that? So a lot of times we have to use distributors. So we go through a third-party distributor that has contracts with those retailers. Sometimes you can work directly depending upon the company and the size of the company. And then there are kind of two primary ways that we contract that. Either they might just purchase, they'll say, okay, I'll buy 100 units of your product. And then that either happens where they'll just pay you kind of they're not going to pay you the retail price, right? They're going to pay you a distribution price, and then they'll turn around and mark it up, and then they'll make a profit off of it as well, right? That's one way. Or they may say, we'll take 100 units, and then as they sell, we'll give you the cut, right? Your cut, and they'll retain a piece. The other is that you actually rent shelf space. So when you think about like a grocery store, for example, most of the products in a grocery store, they're renting shelf space. Where's the best, most viable, ideal space in the store? It's also the most expensive. Eye level, right? The eye level products, right? That's where you're gonna spend the most. And then it's gonna kind of ramp down the lower you get and also the higher you get. And actually the highest is less expensive than the lowest. And there's a very simple reason for that. Any guesses?
Gravity.
Like that. It's height, right? I happen to be a giant, so I can like grab everything at the top, and I've helped so many people, but not everyone can do that. But everybody can get the stuff, right? So there's some very simple reasons. Also, end caps are more expensive, things like that. So there are lots of different ways. When you're thinking retail, if you're going to go into a store, you really have to think about, okay, do I need to find some distribution or third-party distributors to work with to get my product into those bigger stores? Is there small kind of mom and pops local stores that can actually just work directly with the owner and get some shelf space and coordinate with them? So it's really thinking through that. What does that channel look like? Okay, let's talk a little bit about, so we're going to move into key resources, key activities, and key partners, and they all sort of work together. So I'm introducing them all together. But now we'll break it apart. So first, key resources. So your key resources are really everything that you need to actually be able to have a company and deliver to your customer. So these fall into 4 categories: physical, intellectual, human, or financial. Now you may or may not have all 4 of these in your company, sort of depends. So physical, those are your physical assets. We typically all have some type of physical assets. You might actually have a building, a manufacturing site. You may have some type of machine. Maybe it's even just, maybe you have a t-shirt press, right? It's literally just that I'm ironing on t-shirts, right? It could be very simplistic what that machine is, but there could be machines. You may have a POS system. We mentioned Spotify, what else? Square, Toast. There's a lot of them out there. Most of you are going to have some type of POS, otherwise it's much harder to sell. And then any type of distribution network that you might physically need to move your product. Now, intellectual, that's your intellectual assets. So you may have the brand, well, of course, the brand that you create, that's an intellectual property that is yours. And that is why brands are so, they retain so much wealth. And anybody know, like, how much is the Coke brand worth? Any ideas? Just the brand, not the products, but the brand.
Millions, maybe billion.
About $80 billion is the Coca-Cola brand right now. Anybody know what Pepsi's is? You think it'd be about the same?
Halfway less.
It's significantly less. I think last time I checked, it was around like 20. Oh, still 20 billion is, I'll take 20 billion. Right?
What is POS again?
That's your point of sale. So that's like a Square. If the big brands out there would be Square, Toast, what am I going? Square, Toast. Anybody working on any other systems? Lightspeed's another one. There's so many. If you even Shopify, yes, that's another big one. Shopify is an interesting company because they started really as just like a web distributor, and they have grown to be not just POS, but I mean CRM, customer relationship management. They basically Shopify can provide everything your company needs, and most of them are trying to follow suit and provide those sort of resources, because it's almost like if you're going to be the third-party distributor for a point of sale, you need to be able to provide all of those services, or you just can't compete, right? So your brand property knowledge, or proprietary knowledge, sorry. So proprietary knowledge, like, did you come up with some interesting, unique concepts, some new ideas, some new way to create something? That's all your proprietary knowledge. And you may or may not have it patented or copyrighted. If you do, that's great. Then it's really easy to defend. If it's not patented or copyrighted, it doesn't mean that it's, the end of the world by any means. It just means that there could be copycats, quote unquote, out there, and there's not necessarily a lot that you can do about it. And maybe that's okay, right? And then of course, customer databases. Now those customer databases are often tied into your point of sale, your POS system, or you may have a separate like CRM system, the customer relationship management system. So sometimes they're tied together and sometimes they're not. Does anyone know the major CRM system out there? The big gorilla in the room? Salesforce, yes. So Salesforce is the biggest CRM system. It is also the most expensive. There are lots of others, and there are lots of what we call freemium options. We all know what freemium is. Yes, right. So lots of, you can come in at a free point, and then if I want all the bells and whistles, I can start paying as I go. I have given you some examples towards the end. So human resources, of course, is your human capital, right? My employees, the people that are working for me, that's critical. And sometimes we outsource this, right? We think about small companies. If I'm as a small business, as an entrepreneur, I might be the head of marketing, the head of operations, the CEO, the financial head, right? I'm wearing 12 different hats, and I've got like 2 interns helping me make some stuff, but I also need maybe some legal help, and that's so not my field. So maybe I have a friend that I'm outsourcing it to, or maybe even there are third-party vendors that provide legal services, HR services, financial services, right? If you don't have that team, but I can't afford to hire a lawyer onto my company yet, I can't afford to hire an HR rep, you can go to those, and then it's a fraction of the price, and they can manage those services for you. And then financial, of course. What's my cash situation? Where are my lines of credit? What's my stock? What's happening? Right? The financial side is going to be critical in helping you decide what you can do. Okay, thoughts on your key resources? Have you started thinking about those? Have you had questions about them?
It's a service-based marketplace. Both the business side that's providing service being part of the human.
So yes, so I mean, you can kind of fall into both, right? The person who is delivering that service might be your human capital, but what the service is itself might be intellectual or proprietary. Like, let's think about, for example, I don't know, let's say I have like a massage parlor, and my masseuses are like skilled in, I don't know, hot stone therapy, right? So that's a special, unique type. And so the fact that they know that, that's like intellectual property, that they know that skill and they're providing that. But then yes, they're also human capital because I have these employees as well, right? So it can maybe kind of fall into more than one category.
Thank you.
Other questions?
So what exactly is financial? Like, is it like just getting like I don't understand it like very well.
Well, of course, think about it for a company. A lot of times I need some capital to start, right? So what are the traditional ways we go as an entrepreneur? How might I get that capital? Or how might I start launching a business? What are some of the ways that we think about that?
Business loans.
I might go to the bank and try to get a business loan.
Angel investors.
I might try to get an angel investor or some type of venture capitalist.
Grants.
Pardon me?
Grants.
Grants, absolutely. I could go for grants.
I'm gonna try to weasel something from friends and family.
Right. I mean, I like how you say that. But you're right. I mean, I might also go the route of, you know, like maybe I'm worried about the loan. Maybe having a loan kind of stresses me out about having to pay it back, or I'm concerned about going to angel investors or venture capitalists. It feels impossible. So yeah, I might turn to friends and family and think about, okay, how can I just take a small amount of money and maybe just like, you know, kind of very quietly or kind of maneuver my way from a small to a big. And there are companies that do it that way. They kind of just grow out of a very small amount of money and they work their way up. So their cash flow is very small as they grow. So it just sort of depends. And that's what it's talking about. Because certainly my ability to launch a company and what it looks like is going to be different if I'm starting with, let's say, $10,000 from friends and family versus a $200,000 business loan or $500,000 in venture capital, right? All of those are going to look very different. So my financial asset is going to be very different, and how I move forward will be different, right? And it's going to vary company to company, right? If I'm just selling, and I don't mean by just in a negative way by any means, but if I have, let's say, a jewelry business, I might be really successful going to family and friends and getting $5,000, $10,000 and starting that way. And I might be able to just in a couple of years turn that into a huge organization. If I want to go into medical device creation, $10,000 isn't going to cut it. I'm going to have to go to that venture capitalist and try to get $500,000, millions of dollars, because of the R&D alone is going to be extreme, and going through all of the regulatory processes. There's no way I'll survive it if I don't have a lot of capital, right? Now, key activities. Key activities is really about like, what are you doing? And this might seem like, well, duh, I'm making jewelry, or you might be like, this is a question, but it's really thinking about higher level about what is it that I'm actually providing. So typically we see your types of activities fall into 3 kind of areas: problem solving, platform, or production. So certainly a lot of like widgets or items, products themselves fall under the production menu, right? I'm creating, I'm designing, I'm making something, I'm delivering a product. But a lot of service-oriented organizations are actually problem-solving organizations. I have the example of consultants. Certainly consultants, that's maybe a no-brainer that their job is to problem solve. But you could also argue, the moment ago when I was talking about the massage parlor, being the masseuse, we could argue that they're problem solving too. Because if I'm the customer and I have a sore back, you're solving my problem, right? You're providing relief. So it's also thinking about, I'm not just, for example, they often talk about in the transportation industry, like if you think about the trains or airlines, things, right? We're not just transportation. We're in the people moving industry, right? We're not just transporting you, we're moving people, right? So thinking about it, and some people might say like, oh, that's just marketing. You're just marketing your concepts. But you know what? Maybe we are, but it's also thinking about your product from a bigger picture and a bigger concept. And that's tying back to that value proposition. So if I'm Hawaiian Airlines, I'm not just delivering a value or a promise that I'm going to, get you from here to Vegas. I'm saying I'm going to deliver an experience, and I'm going to provide you with an experience as you make your way to Vegas. Right? So it's shifting that. Does that make sense? So what kind of activities do you guys see yourself in? Have you thought about that?
I guess for production, a lot of big companies use Alibaba to get their products from China.
What kind of companies? Okay, what are the different? Can anyone tell me about their company or their idea? Yeah. Okay, so co-working cafe. What is the key activity? I mean, we could say we're providing space, but what is, is that community? We could be creating community. We could be, right, offering an opportunity to
product too, if they offer the coffee too.
Right. I mean, there could be production if you're offering drinks and a cafe side of it, right? There could be the production side, but you're also providing a co-location space that is problem solving, is community creating. And so thinking about that higher order value that you're offering, right? It's not just a place to sit and do my work. It's a place to create community. It's a place to create ideas. And that's like key partners. So these are who we need in order to get things done. All of us have partnerships. No matter how big or small our company is, you will have partnerships. Now, sort of the traditional ones we have would be strategic alliances between non-competitors. The easiest thing to think about this is with a product like your retail supplier. So if I, put my product in locomotion and they're my non-competitor alliance, partner to sell my product, right? And just like in the example, I said Target as a retail supplier, right? So we have all kinds of partners like that where it's not competition. There's co-opetition. So interestingly enough, competitors partner all the time in order to deliver value for themselves and for their consumer. And usually these strategic alliances between competitors happen for various reasons. So you may or may not be aware, how many of you guys know that your iPhone is full of Samsung products? How many of you guys knew that? It is. So Samsung and iPhone, or Apple rather, have a co-opetition because Samsung is, sorry, Apple, I have lots of Apple products, but they're very good at creating the bones and the needs within a phone. And it's actually to the benefit of Apple to just buy those pieces and put them into their phones. And some might argue, like, isn't that hurting Samsung? Well, no. Think about how many more phones they're essentially selling and how much their volume goes up when they're selling the inner parts of an iPhone. Because the reality is, and they understand, the platforms are so different. We've created this world of platforms when it comes to the digital space that make it fairly prohibitive for you to jump. How many of you have recently moved from PC to Apple or Apple to PC? And I was talking about Samsung, right? Is that an easy jump to make? No, right? Not typically, right? There's all these things like, oh, I've got Apple Music, I've got all my apps, I've got all, right? They've created on both sides an ability where I don't ever want to change the platform that I'm in. So it's unlikely that Apple is going to take over and have 100% of the market. And it's very unlikely that Samsung is going to take over and have 100% of the market. But if Samsung sells all those products to Apple, they have a huge ability to increase their profit margins. Right, so that co-opetition, and it benefits Apple because they don't have to spend the money on manufacturing; they're just buying the product. Another example certainly is Pfizer and biotech. We think about the COVID reality, right? They joined forces; they're typically competitors in the pharmaceuticals industry, but they joined forces to create that COVID-19 vaccine, and it benefited both of them. Joint ventures, so we come together to create a new business. Example there is actually Miller Coors. So I found this out recently. I thought Miller Coors merged. So Miller Beer and Coors, right, merged. They actually didn't fully merge. They created a third-party joint venture to be able to effectively compete against Anheuser-Busch. And so Anheuser-Busch is AB InBev. They had a huge merger, I want to say 15 years ago now, with InBev, which is the largest liquor distributor in Europe. Anheuser-Busch was the largest here in the US. And so AB InBev is a power unto itself. And so smaller beer distributors, Miller's, Coors, they couldn't compete. And so they actually created a joint venture called Miller Coors and are promoting and distributing their beers together so that they could more effectively compete against Anheuser-Busch. Anybody watch the Super Bowl? Did they see the ad? There was an ad where there was like a Miller guy at the bar and a Coors guy, and they were fighting. And then at the end, Blue Moon came out. So Blue Moon is owned by Miller. And so, yeah, so again, they're a joint venture and they're utilizing their power to be able to effectively continue to compete against that larger Anheuser-Busch competitor. So interesting joint ventures occur. And then of course there's buyer-supplier relationships. So these are just when you think on the supplier side. So I have like Goodyear has a rubber manufacturer supplier, but whatever your company is, right? If you have a product, you're going to have a supplier. So not always necessarily with a service-oriented organization will you have buyer-supplier relationships, but typically your motivations for having partnerships is you want to optimize optimization and economy of scale. That's certainly what Coors and Miller are doing. Reduction of risk and uncertainty, and acquisition of some sort of particular resource or activity. So anybody thought about their key partners or have any questions about key partners? Thought about them yet? Maybe. All right. Let's move on to cost structure. So cost structure can be more important in some businesses than in others. You do want to think about what are the biggest costs in your business model? What are the most expensive key resources? What are the most expensive key activities? And then there are some characteristics of a cost structure. Certainly, we always have fixed costs. These are costs we can't change. What are typical fixed costs? Rent, of course.
Salaries, employees.
Salaries, absolutely.
Packaging.
So packaging sometimes can be a fixed cost, sometimes can be seen as a variable cost, and that depends on how you allocate it, in the sense that you sometimes can benefit on economies of scale. So for example, if I'm small and I'm only buying maybe enough to sell 100, like I have 100 boxes, 100 packages, so I could send out, it's potentially going to cost me more per unit than if I could buy 1,000 or 500,000 right at once. And so sometimes we see packaging as a variable cost depending upon that economy of scale, but sometimes we identify it as a fixed cost too. It just depends on the business model. You have the flexibility to sort of align that how you see fit. Same with actually some situations around employee costs do tend to be fixed, but for example, marketing sometimes is seen as a variable cost depending upon they allocate it, and that they'll raise it up if we've got more money, we're doing well, we're going to increase it, and then if we're not doing so well, we drop it, right? So it becomes seen as a variable cost, and that's how they allocate it differently. So again, your business model has a little bit of flexibility. So I mentioned those economies of scale, those advantages. As outputs expand, your cost per unit can go down. We see that typically in product sales. We don't always see huge economies of scale in like service industries necessarily. It just depends. Because certainly, for example, if I'm providing some type of service, if it's massage, anything, it's going to still take me the same amount of time to provide that service every single time. So I don't always benefit as much from an economy of scale. And then economies of scope is as you grow your business, you may have offshoots, right? You may have product expansion. And so you're benefiting from that growth of those product expansions on the overall cost of your company. One example might be the cost of rent is a fixed cost. But if I have a small, let's say, I have a small little booth at Ala Moana, they have a little kiosk, and maybe I start out just selling necklaces. And so I have to sell a lot of necklaces to cover that rent, but maybe I grow and I start having all kinds of jewelry. So I have product expansion and bracelets and rings and maybe even hair items, all different kinds of things. Now that economy of scope, that growth of my business is going to help reduce some of that fixed cost, because now it's not reliant on me just selling necklaces, right? I have more expansion. I have more likelihood of increasing my cost per customer, because maybe I can talk you into that necklace and that bracelet and maybe even those earrings, right? And so that helps us. So that economy of scope is kind of growing the scale of your business.
One question, if it's a service, what will be the fixed cost then? Maybe the website or?
The fixed cost in a service industry?
Yeah.
So websites, certainly, employee costs can be fixed. And if you need space for your service, you may or may not need space for your service, so rent could be a fixed cost. Also, like with taxes, right? I might say, oh, I'm going to use my house, right? I'm going to have an office. I have an office in my house, and that's going to be my work. So I may not actually be officially paying rent for my business in the sense that I still have to pay rent on my house because I live there. But then that becomes an allocation thing on the back end for taxes, right? Where I start allocating a portion of that off. And so it is like the business is paying for part of it. That becomes more complex. And so certainly if you're not familiar with taxes, you definitely want to outsource a tax expert to help you maximize the reduction of fixed costs when you're allocating within your home, those types of things. But certainly space is a fixed cost as well.
All right, going back to key partners, we had a question from Corey on Zoom.
Oh, sorry.
How do you set boundaries with key partners?
How do you set boundaries? So oftentimes with key partners, we have structured contracts with them. So that sometimes already sort of from the beginning kind of sets the parameters on what that boundary looks like. And I would encourage you to try to create that from the beginning. Sometimes it's very easy if I'm a small company and maybe I, go into that like local motion store, that small local company, and I start talking to them and they agree to start selling my product. And it might be more of that handshake deal. Yes. And that's where I think you can have a lot of issues with potential problems with boundaries, because it's sort of great. What are we doing here? It's sort of, we don't know. If you're going to start doing that, it would be good to just in a very, polite way, say, can we sit down and sort of hash out what this looks like so it's benefiting both of us? So then you do have those contracts and boundaries put in place from the beginning, because if you don't, that becomes a slippery slope. So it is important to have it in writing as much as possible. And yes, traditional partnerships tend to be that way anyways, but if it's a small company and it's more of a handshake, try to write it down.
Like an agreement or like.
Yeah, so like, okay, we want to agree on this. I want to make sure that I understand that we're on the same page. I'm not misinterpreting anything. You're not misinterpreting anything. So let's get it down on paper. Yeah. Now there's two ends of the cost structure. You could be, so the way that we structure our business is sort of a continuum. You can be very cost driven and value driven, but you can also be sort of in the middle, right? It's not either or. So cost-driven companies are very focused on minimizing costs. They are trying to make the leanest possible organization, right? Reducing as much cost as possible. So providing the most automation, outsourcing. So example of this is like, instead of paying for an employee that does human resources, I outsource those few human resources activities because it's less expensive than having a full-time employee, right? And I can outsource all of these different things. So some of the ways that we think about or an example of cost-driven would be any type of value brand. So like Costco, the Kirkland brands, these are very cost-driven organizations. So value driven is less concerned with the cost implications, and they're just focusing on that value creation, that value delivery. And there's oftentimes a high degree of personalization that's going on. Certainly any type of luxury or premium brand. So think about the difference in a hotel. If I go to the Super 8, I know it's gonna be very cost driven. I'm gonna pay a minimal amount. And yeah, my expectation is that I'm gonna have a clean bed. I'm gonna probably have a TV and I'm gonna have a clean bathroom, but that's about it. There's no frills, no extras. Now, if I go to which one do I want to pick? The Alani, right? If I go to Alani, I'm going to expect all kinds of extras, right? I'm going to expect that they're going to have put Mickey and they're going to embroider Mickey everywhere. And I'm going to be looking for him and I'm going to be finding him. And I'm going to have all of these beautiful touches, even in the shampoo and the soaps that I get. And they're going to cater to me as a mom, and they're going to already have a crib and in a high chair and all these things. I don't have to ask for any of it. And it just comes, and I'm going to be able to have character breakfast, and I'm going to be able to hug Mickey and do all of these things, right? So that's all about providing that personalization, that extra, right? So what about you guys? Do you think oftentimes entrepreneurs tend to initially be very kind of cost driven, because it's I got this much money and I got to make sure this company launches. But have you thought at all about how that structure might look, or what are we trying to do? Are we trying to provide that luxury promise? And then how do I do that with a limited budget?
Our target market is students who probably going for more cost driven and possible.
Yes, and it's important to think about your consumer, right? A lot of times, whether it's creating a marketing strategy or thinking about an overall business model strategy, is always making sure your consumer is at the forefront of your idea and your value proposition. Because yeah, if I was making a cafe and a working space for executives, I'm absolutely going value driven, right? I want to make all the extra touches so that that executive wants to live at my workspace all the time. But it's also going to cost them a lot of money. And I probably would even consider like a membership fee, right? Because it's also annoying to executives to be like doling out their card all the time and paying for things. Think about all the country clubs, things like that. They don't pay for anything, right? It just goes on their card or they're on their account, right? Now that's one way, but yeah, if it's students, they're much more concerned about every penny and where it's going because they're at a very different point in their life. So being cost driven when that's my focal point of my consumer base is going to be critical and important and ensure success, right?
Ours is a service and it's consumer to consumer, kind of similar to like Lyft or Airbnb. So we would just want to cut like a small percentage of each transaction.
Okay, so you could potentially be very, in that situation, a lot of times you end up being more value driven because you're improving the need for your service, right? Now, yes, you want to be cost driven in that if it's too expensive, right? If Lyft was exponentially more expensive than like calling the taxi service, it's like two, right? Then I wouldn't use Lyft, right? I would call the taxi because why would I spend that much more if they're not providing? But when I start thinking about the value that they provide, their price is not exponentially more, and the ease of just being able to use my app. And I know I can watch them arrive. I know the name of the person. I can all these things. That's that value add that makes it worth it to me to utilize. And so you kind of have that mixture of being kind of aware of being cost driven, but you have to prove the value, right? So that people will want you as an intermediary.
Let me ask you a question. What would you consider a social media platform, even in its early stages? Would it be cost or value?
So it sort of depends. So typically a social media platform is going to focus on value because you have to prove why people should utilize you. And usually if we look at the models, like social media platforms can't monetize right away, right? You're not making money for a while until you prove that value, you get people on board, and now I can push monetization through the form of advertising. Right? And that's usually how you make money on a social media platform. Think about TikTok, right? We didn't have ads on TikTok right away. That's the latest one. What's the next one going to be? So how are we going to monetize Be Real? No, it's not Be Real. How are we going to monetize Be Real? Have you seen anyone trying to monetize Be Real? So what we started to see with Be Real is companies operating. So like Sour Patch Kids, for example, is one of the first ones doing it. And so in the Be Real, it's like one of the Sour Patch Kids faces, right? And then they're like off doing an activity. So it's like the product almost interacting and being anthropomorphized into the Be Real app. So it'll be interesting to see if that continues. It's kind of funny and comical right now, but will that become annoying? Will that be irritating to the consumer? Will we want to continue to watch that? Right? That'll be interesting to see how that continues to move forward or how it may change. All right, other questions on the cost structure?
I've also had trouble understanding the differences between economies of scale and scope. So could you try explaining one more time?
Sure. So economies of scale is really just about the individual units. And as I grow those individual units, saving on costs. So if I had a t-shirt business, if I was selling it just out of the back of my truck and I was maybe making like 50 shirts at once, I probably am spending $5 to $10 per shirt just to have the shirt, right? And so then I have to turn around and sell it to you for maybe $20 because I just got to make some profit. But if I grow and now all of a sudden I'm selling 1,000 shirts or 5,000 shirts, now I can start ordering those t-shirts at maybe $2, $3 a piece, maybe even pennies. And now I can, if I continue to sell at $20, my margin is humongous, right? I've doubled my margin, or I can drop the price of my t-shirts, which maybe increases my consumer base because I'm still getting the same margin. If I'm only paying $2 a shirt now, I can sell you that shirt for $12 instead of 20, and I'll still make $10 on the sale. Right? So economies of scale are all about the increase in volume of my order decreases the unit price. And then economies of scope is where we're growing our operation. So instead of just maybe being a t-shirt company, now I'm selling shorts and hats and all of these other things. So instead of just selling you one shirt, now I'm also selling you a whole outfit. So that's increasing. So it's basically about like
Expanding too.
Product expansion or service expansion. So not just, if I'm a service industry, not just maybe doing, let's say massage, maybe I'm now a hair salon and a nail salon and all kinds of things. Right?
I was going to maybe ask you two quick questions. First, what's the first item you said? Let's be real, or whatever the real.
Be real.
Be real. Yeah. And then second, I was going to ask you, where do you think like the social media marketing or the influencer marketing is going to be in like 10 years, like in terms of relevance, or where do you think the trends are going?
Okay, so you were asking me what is Be Real?
Yes.
So Be Real is just the newest social media app that they feel will probably launch on a big scale. So there's new social media apps that launch all the time, and most of them just stay small or sort of fizzle out. But then like TikTok was the last one that really went big. So I thought maybe Be Real will be the next one. So Be Real is something where it was sort of tried to be the opposite of Instagram or TikTok, where it's not polished. So essentially Be Real will send you a notification and say, it's time to be real. And so I pick up my phone and it simultaneously takes a picture of me, a selfie, and like in here. So my Be Real, if I did it right now, would show that I'm here talking and you're all watching me. And so it's supposed to be, that's the concept, is that it's showing exactly what you're doing at any given time. It's not this like perfect coiffed, like I took 500 photos of myself in this perfect lighting. So that's the concept of Be Real. And then influencers is interesting. It's changed, right? When influencers first became a big thing, it was all about, it still was sort of traditional. Now we've had influencers forever. We just didn't call them that. It was sponsorships. It was Michael Jordan and his Air Jordans, right? That was influencer marketing, but we just didn't call it influencer marketing, right? So when we first started, it was the Kardashians of the world and all these people that were big Hollywood stars, because that was what we were used to. And we were spending, I don't know if they can pull it today because things have changed already, but at one point the Kardashians were pulling $500,000 per post. Could you imagine? I'll take that. But they realized after there was an iteration of companies saying, I can't afford that. And so they started going to these micro influencers. So micro influencers are like the example where I said about momfluencers. So that's a term for like a mom who talks about mom stuff. And maybe I have like 1,000, maybe over 1,000 or 5,000 people that follow me. But I could be hired as an influencer and talk about mom products. And only to that 5,000, but you know what? That 5,000 are really engaged, and a bunch of them are moms. So it's the company saying, do I want to spend $500,000 for who knows who's looking at Kylie Jenner? Or do I spend like a couple $100 and I can get 5,000 captive key target market people? And so that's that micro influencer shift. So it's definitely moving that way. I think it will continue to trend that way, at least for the short term. Okay, guys, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about revenue streams and unit economics. Okay. Are we ready? I just say sometimes with my grad students, there's always like a break because it's a 3-hour class, and I'll be like, "Come back to me," and they'll kind of look at me. I'm like, "I've lost you, haven't I? Are we done with the class today?" No, just kidding. Have to joke. All right, so let's talk about revenue streams. So this becomes, of course, a really important thought of, how do I make money? Isn't that at the bottom line, right? Sometimes we like to think idealistically and about all the wonderful things that we're doing, but at the end of the day, a lot of times it comes down to that bottom line. How are we going to make some money? So if you can really ask yourself, what value is each customer segment truly willing to pay? We can really think about that objectively. We can start to think about how you can generate revenue streams from those different target markets as effectively as possible. So let's talk a little bit more about that. There are two main types of revenue streams: transaction revenue streams and recurring revenues, right? So of course, transactional or transaction revenues, that's a one-time payment, right? So I go into Target and I buy something and I leave. Now we have all kinds of one-time payments in life, service, product, all kinds of realities where we're doing one-time payments. Now the goal is that I can actually kind of turn that into a recurring payment. And then if I can reinforce my concept, I can reinforce my brand, you know. Think about, well, I've got Nike on here, for example, but think about Nike. I go in and I buy those. I have 3 boys. I talk about them in my class sometimes. And they are big into sports, and they of course have to wear their like Jordan 1s and things like that. Just drive me crazy. Nike, take all of my money, right? So I may go into the Nike store or whatever, and I buy some Jordan 1s for my boys because they need new shoes. And then that's a one-time transaction revenue. But guess what? That brand is strong. They identify with the brand. Nike's done an epic job with their marketing. So next time I need to buy shoes, guess what? I go back and do another transaction revenue with them, right? So in a lot of ways, I'm converting that transaction revenue into really a recurring revenue, right? And that's the goal for returning consumers. But of course, our traditional thought of recurring revenues is anytime there's sort of some sort of subscription-based fee, where it's just this ongoing payment. And usually, ideally now, we want it where we're not even thinking about it, right? It's pre-locked in, it's an auto pay situation. And sometimes that's not necessarily always to the benefit of the consumer. How many times have you maybe signed up for a subscription and inadvertently paid for several months or at least 1 month more than you intended because you stopped using the service, but you just forgot about the auto pay? Great for me if I'm the business owner, not so great for you if you weren't intending to continue to pay, right? But that's maybe if we're thinking in a very black and white bottom line, that's a benefit to the business owner, right? With the recurring revenues. So let's think about in the real world. I gave one example of Nike, but does Nike have both transaction revenues and recurring revenues? Anybody? What would be their recurring revenues?
Well, since you said like people are so brand loyal.
Mm-hmm. Brand loyalty is one way. Any others?
Like membership?
Yes, they have memberships and they have an app, right? They have some different ongoing membership apps, like with
rewards too, yeah, rewards, points rewards.
And rewards, yes. So there's other ways that they get you with the recurring.
They have like contracts, so they'll contract with schools or with businesses, so they're constantly purchasing shoes from them.
Yes, of course, we know Nike. I think they're at one point, I swear they had like 100% of all the NCAA contracts, but that's changed now. I think they have about 30% because Under Armour and Adidas also have contracts. Anyone know what UH's contract is currently?
Now it's Adidas.
Adidas, yeah. It was Under Armour, but it's shifted to Adidas. So what about Netflix?
A subscription.
Is it just the recurring revenue, right? Do we have any type of one-time revenue or transaction revenue with Netflix? No, you know, in the past, right, if we roll back to when they used to have actual like DVDs mailed to your house, they did have some transaction revenues that were sort of fines and fees. Like if I, you know, stopped paying my recurring fee and I didn't return the DVD, then I would get charged like $50 for that DVD or whatever. So sometimes they had some sort of like concerning transaction fees you didn't want to receive. But now the way that they're all streaming, it's really just that recurring revenue. Now, ways you can have revenue streams. Remember, this is all just as reference. This is a lot of copy up here, but it's for reference for later. There are different ways, whether that be transaction or recurring, that you could make money. So an asset sale, this is what we think about the most often. So that an asset sale is simply when I'm doing traditional product sales, right? That's my asset. I'm selling you the rights to a physical product, right? You purchase the widget that I made for you, right? The the necklace, whatever. Usage fee would be your traditional service fee. So I came in and got my nails done and I paid for you to do my nails or whatever that service is. So asset sale and usage fee are the things that we do on a daily basis all the time. We're not even thinking about, that's the quote unquote real terms for them, or the academic terms. Certainly we're all familiar with subscription fees. We probably all have more subscriptions than we want, right? Or that we're even aware of. That's really where we're shifting so much more as a society, that there's a lot of value from a business platform to receive it, sort of that passive income, right? And it becomes a passive sale by the consumer, so you sort of forget about it. Now, lending, renting, and leasing, certainly the easiest thing we think about is real estate or cars. That's the first thing we go to if we're thinking about lending, renting, or leasing. But that's anytime we provide any sort of temporary access or exclusive right to someone. And it could be different, right? It might not necessarily just be real estate or cars. For example, your co-opting space that you're thinking about, you could have a lending, renting, and leasing income situation where maybe you have opportunities where you rent out your space for special events. And that becomes, and that's a different revenue stream. Licensing. So typically we see that anytime we have any like media, think about music, video, right? Brokerage fees. Oftentimes, of course, we're thinking about higher level real estate. Like I have that broker, that's the intermediary, but actually credit cards could be intermediaries here. And then advertising. The social media platform, they might be looking at advertising. That's that third party interaction where we're paying for the, we're generating income because I'm allowing you to advertise on my platform, or, and we're seeing different situations where we have that come through. Some schools, for example, or like the MBA, some of them are started having additional logos. We notice, can you guys think of any examples where we're seeing even like pro athletes wearing additional logos on their uniforms? Didn't Golden State have Rakuten for a while?
Yeah, they had like a bunch of stuff, like it's kind of like different like logos like on the jersey and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the NFL when they were pink, is that like kind
So
of?
that's sort of similar, but that is a similar concept, but in a sense that's them giving away to a third party because they were pink for like the American Cancer Society and the Breast Cancer Society of America. So they're actually donating that typically, but it's the same concept because they're raising awareness for that organization. So in a nonprofit sector, right, where like Golden State was making additional revenue through the advertising of like Rakuten on their uniform. So, even though we think about advertising sometimes easily on social media platforms, there's a lot of ways to have advertising as a revenue stream. There's also both fixed menu pricing and then dynamic pricing when we think about revenue streams. So fixed menu pricing is when I look at my different types of revenue, how are they coming in and how am I setting it up? So like, for example, list price, that's where I set a fixed price for my product. I'm selling the shirts for $20 per shirt. That's the price, right? It's sort of accepted. The product feature is when I'm going to increase or decrease the price based on the different features that you choose from my product base. So one of the easiest ways to think about this is maybe buying a car. You have your base model, and that's going to be typically the lowest cost. But if I want to add a bunch of product features, that's going to increase my cost and vary based on how many unique value proposition product features I add to the car. So we know, maybe the base model of a car could be, let's say 20,000, but if I got every single bell and whistle, I might be up at 80 grand, right? And then there could be every price in between depending upon what other people purchase. Customer segment dependent. So this is shifting the price depending upon your customer segment. How effective is this? And can you think of examples, or is there any issues with the thought of doing a customer segment dependent pricing?
Can you face compliance issues like?
So you have to be careful about that. Yeah. Oh, Yeah.
Oh, okay, I was just kind of thinking with like products that are designer, like Gucci, you can sell a white shirt there for $2K, but then I'm gonna go to Walmart and pay $2 for basically the same shirt. But with their brand, they're marketing to very, like, they have their target market that is gonna be willing to pay $2,000 for a white Gucci shirt.
Right. So customer segment can based on the brand. So yes, a luxury brand. Yes, literally we could see the same white T-shirt, like you were saying, at Walmart for $5 and $2,000 at Gucci. I see online somebody said the pink tax. Yes, that's a good example too. So if you're not familiar with the pink tax, that's where we upcharge women for the same product. And usually the reason it's called the pink tax is because we often make it pink, right? Think about all the shavers out there that, it's just like my husband's shaver, except it's pink, so it's better. And I get to pay twice as much.
I was gonna say potential issues are too that if I sell it on like different platforms, same product, different pricing, I could piss a lot of the customers off. I can lose a lot of like potential customers, and then they can like harm the brand along with the compliance issues.
Yeah, so you have to be careful. Concerns about compliance and concerns about turning off your consumer and irritating them. So you have to have a good rationale. So for example, Gucci, like thinking about that premium luxury brand, that works for them because Gucci is not selling to everybody. They're selling to a very exclusive population, and they are selling their brand. You're paying $2,000 for that shirt because I want a Gucci shirt, not because I need a white shirt, because I want a Gucci shirt, right? And so it works for them. What you see with a lot of customer segmentation is it works on brand basis, or if I have a really good rationale or ability to push it. For example, a senior discount, or I position, student discounts, or I give some sort of population, some sort of advantage, but it's almost like an accepted advantage. Like I'm okay that I'm spending more if I'm not a student, because, students maybe don't, we have all these reasons why we want to give students the benefit, or seniors might be on a fixed income. So we're not pushing back on that type of a segment discount or shift. So you have to be kind of weigh the pros and cons. For example, the pink tax for a long time was accepted. People didn't really push back on it. Maybe I was irritated that I was paying, twice as much for the shavers or whatever it was that I was purchasing. But we had a lot of pushback in the last several years about the pink tax, and many companies have started shifting. And in fact, specifically razors like Harry's and several of the others have actually stopped selling that kind and pushing the fact that every shaver is a shaver. So like, why spend more on a pink one when you can just buy ours? So there's actually been pushback on the pink tax as well. And then volume dependent. Oh,
can I add one?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wasn't going to speak, but a classic example of customer segment dependent would be airlines.
Oh, that's a great one.
Class, basic economy plus, so you're segmenting, or you're all going to the same destination. How you get there is a little bit different between segments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. I hadn't thought about. The airlines is a great example of customer segment as well. And then volume dependent. Certainly my volume my price maybe goes up and down based on my volume. And sometimes we see that literally shifted out to you, maybe in the sale rack, buy, 3 for $20. They're they're $10 a piece, but I'll give you 3 for $20. So we may see that actually pushed out to the consumer, but it may also be based on my unit volume, right? And now dynamic pricing, that's when things change based on market conditions. So certainly negotiation, that's anytime we're bargaining. We might see this where do we typically see negotiation or bargaining occurring?
Oh, like if we go to like a swap meet or something like that.
Certainly the swap meet.
Car sales.
Car sales, the swap meet. So there's different places where it's accepted. And there's also certain places where it would not be accepted. And that changes culture to culture and, community to community, because there are countries and communities that we can go into, and I can go into a retail store and barter and negotiate, and it's absolutely acceptable. And in fact, it would be weird if I didn't. But we know that here in the US, if I walked into a retail store and I started to try to barter with them, they would be very confused by that, right? That's not an accepted part of a regular retail store here in the US.
My cousin always like goes to any store and he like makes some dumb comments about like having a discount for him. It's really
Yeah, but sometimes if we're used to it, right? If I grew up, right, it's hard sometimes. If I grew up in a community where it was very common to negotiate any and all purchases, that would be very hard to go into a culture that didn't do that and not want to do it, right? Right. And certainly a lot of our things, right, as entrepreneurs, we are not necessarily thinking on a global scale yet. We are thinking maybe on a local scale. We're thinking, how can I just open up, in Manoa, right? So we might not be thinking about that, but if we're ever thinking we might scale out into the global, those are things that you have to start to think about. How does my potential pricing mechanism shift if I move into these other communities, and how do I deal with that? So yield management, that's based on inventory and time of purchase. So this can, airline seats themselves can be impacted by this in the sense that, we talked about the customer segment where we mentioned about if I'm going to have first class, business class, economy, but we see yield management in, I feel like Southwest does this exceptionally based on like the time. And it'll be like, oh, $300 for this ticket, but there's only 3 left at this price, right? There's only 3 left, buy it today, right? Or if I go back an hour later, now it's $450 or whatever. So it's yield management based on essentially the number of economy seats or first class. I'm always buying economy. Let's not kid ourselves. Right? I'm not living the first class life. That was my dad joke, but it's also true. And then real-time market, when we obviously see the shift in supply and demand. So we can see this in housing. We can see this in cars. I mean, think about the end of COVID. What happened with new and used cars? Anybody know, especially locally? Yeah. Car prices skyrocketed, particularly used cars for a period were skyrocketing. Anybody know why used cars were skyrocketing? Essentially, it was because no one could get product anew, right? And part of that was just inventory was low because they hadn't been manufacturing, but also we had all of these other downstream issues where different parts of the cars hadn't been manufactured. So maybe the, GM factory that could actually put the pieces together and make the car was up and running, but they didn't have the wheels and the tires and the engine because all of those factories were not working. So there was a lot of issues with new purchase cars because they didn't have the inventory. So used cars were skyrocketing because people needed cars. And then of course auctions. We see auctions in all different situations, and they create all kinds of competitive bidding and can create very surprising pricing. Right, both in a positive and a negative way. Sometimes your product or your service can go very low amount, and sometimes it can be, go up for an exponential amount. It doesn't want to change. Okay. So have you guys thought at all about your different revenue streams or any, questions around that or what you're thinking about?
If you look at a product that's like it's gonna be like an asset sale and that's it, is it like a way where you kind of branch out to get other revenue streams?
Sure, absolutely. Can you give me an example of a product or what you're thinking?
Oh yeah, so like my team's idea is they've got a tennis squeegee that gets like rainwater off the court, but like it's like four-in-one collapsible and like you can bring it like anywhere you go.
I like it.
I need that.
So certainly you have asset sale right away. Of course, the product itself you're selling. Now there could be potential partnerships with other companies where you could get advertising revenue because you're promoting you're cross-promoting products. You might have an opportunity for maybe there's some type of subscription fee with it. Now you'd have to look at the product itself. Like I'm thinking, little known fact, I played tennis in high school. I was actually the captain of my tennis team. Amazing, right? So I have many memories of squeegeeing off of the courts. how long does that squeegee last? Like, is there potential for subscription fees for, replacement or new product, right? So you're gonna start thinking about how might I shift those different concepts, because that one squeegee, and sometimes that also shifts your product, right? Potentially you could make a product, a squeegee that lasts forever. You never need to replace it, which idealistically is wonderful. But from a business model, might not be what you want, because maybe I need that recurring consumer to continue my company, right? So maybe I don't want it to be that good. I want it to last a period of time, but then I want you to cycle back with a subscription, right?
So like using planned obsolescence kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Other thoughts on your revenue stream? No, we can move on. Okay, so unit economics. So unit economics is really the metrics, and it's really starting to analyze and look at what's going on and how am I doing, right? Am I working? Is it working? Am I selling what I think I'm selling? Am I turning the profit I think I'm turning? So it's helping you understand where you're at with your revenue and your costs in order to continue to grow, be able to pivot when you need to, all of these different things. It's calculating. First, we need to think about a unit. Now remember, there's a lot of reinforced, like this is for reference later. Don't be overwhelmed by the amount of copy on the screen. So what is a unit? You have to decide what the unit means for your business. Of course, on the individual level, if we're thinking about a product, each product is typically considered a unit, but not always. It's how you want to measure it. Perhaps I own a restaurant. Now I might identify a unit as each individual item that I sell. So, I have a family of 4 come in and sit down and they all order an entree and a drink. I could say that's 8 units, right? 4 entree units, 4 drink units. And maybe that's how I identify it. And I think and a lot of restaurants do identify it down to that singular platform. But perhaps instead I identify each bill as a unit instead. So when that family of 4 sits down, that's only 1 unit, right? It's 1 table, that entire thing. So you have the ability to sort of identify what you want your unit to be. So typically that's breaking it up as units as customers or units as a product sold. So other examples, oftentimes we see this in SaaS, so software as a service, where I would identify my unit as a customer. So each business I'm selling to. Now, one business might have 30,000 employees. And so that unit is huge, right? And the amount of memberships and subscriptions within that and the size of that sale is huge versus another unit where maybe it's a small business of 25, but they're each a single unit, where products typically are literally individuals. So you have to identify, and typically the way that we figure this out is by how much interaction we have to have. So when we think about businesses as 1 unit, sometimes SaaS is an easy way to kind of conceptualize it, in that if I am selling software, let's say I'm selling Salesforce to a company, I might be selling 1,500, 2,500 subscriptions to cover this massive organization, but I'm the main salesperson and I'm working with, 1 or 2 other main people at that organization. So it's really just that personal interrelationship. And it doesn't really matter how many more people they add to that subscription, because it's still just that one partnership, that one connection. Whereas, products and units sold tend to be individualized.
For Facebook, would it one of their units be marketplace? Is that or is it more on the?
So with Facebook, I would imagine that their units, so that would be sort of their product offerings, right? So marketplace is one product offering. They could say Messenger is another, and then just the main platform is another one. And so if you're thinking about the main platform. If I'm trying to, my consumer in that sense, typically, if I'm Facebook, is going to be other businesses, right? I'm trying to get you to advertise on my platform. So they may either, again, consider my company contracting and putting ads on Facebook as one unit, because my business is the unit. And it doesn't matter if I'm selling, if I have one ad or 100 ads on Facebook, I'm one unit. Or they may identify every ad that I put on as a unit. Right. And I don't mean that like you see the ad and you see the ad and you see the ad and now we have like I mean that I pushed one, I pushed an ad campaign out, that's one unit, or it's me as a business, doesn't matter how many times I advertise, I'm one unit. So again, you can identify it in different ways. It's what works for you. How do you want to manage that relationship? How do you want to manage those metrics and view your consumers in unit base? Any other questions thoughts on that one? I know it's a little bit hard and conceptual, and a lot of times, again, if we're product based or kind of simple service based, we tend to see individual kind of items as units as opposed to a whole business as one unit.
And as a service, the units should be kind of the transactions or the exchange of the money, right?
Right. So the reason we start to look at unit economics is so that we can measure early success. We can see what's happening right away. We can evaluate changes. We want to be looking at our dashboards, looking at our metrics right away and understanding what is going on so that we can make the shifts. It's important in any business to be able to pivot, and so we call it like pivot or persevere is the jargon. We love jargon terms in marketing and business. We're all about jargon terms. So pivoting is I see an issue, I see a roadblock. Maybe it's a new competitor coming in. Maybe my consumer base is changing. All these, maybe there's inflation on the rise. That's potentially going to hurt me, right? So I need to shift something. I need to make a change in order to stay successful. Or I'm monitoring and things are going, well. I can just keep persevering on the path that I'm at right now. Things are happening how I expect, right? So we want to be able to evaluate if we need to make changes. And then it also helps you with financial planning because you can start forecasting out where are things going? What can I kind of expect is happening on the horizon?
What are the biggest roadblocks to pivoting? Like, seems like some companies aren't good at it necessarily.
Yes, I would say pivoting can be very problematic. In my experience, I think one of the biggest barriers to effective pivots is just being open to it. It is very hard to be objective when it's your business.
So how do you do that?
Well, the different data metrics are good because you can't really fight the data, right? I guess we can always rationalize. We're always good at rationalizing data and being like, well, it's really not as bad as it seems, right? But if we can be objective about the data that we're looking at, and we can try to remove ourselves from that connection, that's the thing, especially with entrepreneurs, is that we have, I put my blood, sweat, and tear into this business, right? I have been there from the beginning and I've done everything and I can't fail, right? And that's where we often lose our ability to pivot because we've attached ourselves to one idea for so long that it's really hard for us to shift gears. So part of being in that lean process and having that like MVP is that you're constantly iterating and that you get used to, like, I'm not sold on any one idea. This is not the product, right? It's always changing. And that helps you stay objective and that helps you make those moves and those pivots. So typically it's that we get like too myopic in our own world. We just put blinders on and we're just like, this is what's happening, and to the failure of ourselves. The other sometimes is when the company gets too big. And I don't mean that in a negative light, but oftentimes when the company is really large, it becomes very difficult to be agile. When you're a small entrepreneurial organization and there's a handful of you perhaps that are working, it's pretty easy to be like, hey guys, we need to do this. right? And you have that quick meeting and you can shift gears very quickly. Well, when you have hundreds, maybe even thousands of employees, you're now playing the game of red tape, right? It's not just, oh, I think we should do this and I can enact it. It's, we need to have a meeting and a meeting and a meeting, and we need to have this approval and this approval and this approval and this approval before we can move forward on anything. And it becomes very lengthy in your ability to make pivots. So some organizations, though, have gotten really large and been able to keep that sort of agile frame because they've kept it a very focused concept of staying agile. Okay, I'm going to go through some concepts now. I'm going to move this little guy, maybe. Usually it like totally hides away, but not today. Okay, I want to make sure that we are familiar with these different types of metrics. So first is lifetime value, or LTV. Sometimes we also talk about it as customer lifetime value, but LTV. So this is my average amount that you are going to spend over the lifetime of your relationship with the company. And customer lifetime value is a critical factor in deciding how I'm going to interact with you. So if we think about the main pivot point when we think of a strategy like customer relationship management. So customer relationship management, or CRM, oftentimes we associate that concept with Salesforce, with the software platforms that are available now. But really, CRM is a strategy that has existed for a very long time. We could argue since the dawn of small businesses, when we all lived in a community and there was like the baker and everybody, he still did build relationships with you, right? Customer relationship management is about having relationships with your consumers, but not relationships, just general relationships with everybody. It's identifying and prioritizing relationships based on that customer lifetime value. So prior to the Salesforces of the world, the companies that could do this were luxury and premium brand companies because they're working in such a small population, but also companies that were able to sort of break out certain customer segments. So actually Nordstrom wrote a whole book called The Nordstrom Way. They were one of the largest sort of mass brands that were able to effectively do customer relationship management before any of the digital platforms existed. And how they did that was with personal shoppers. So they identified through customer lifetime value that top, 1 to 5% of their shoppers that were spending the most money. And they assigned personal shoppers to those people. And they still do this to this day, right? Could you imagine having a personal shopper and they call you, be like, hey, we got this, and you come in, and it increases that lifetime value of that consumer, because now I have somebody calling me, telling me about this beautiful couture dress or what, because I'm at a price point where I'm buying those types of items. And I'm, instead of maybe spending, my customer lifetime value was maybe $1 million. Now it's moving into the $1.5–2 million range because I'm upping my monthly spend because of that personal shopper. So Nordstrom was able to do it with personal shoppers. But you imagine now, if we didn't have digital, that would be a very costly reality for most businesses. We don't have that person power. So when the digital realm came and companies like Salesforce existed and started to build up, we all of a sudden have the ability to leverage customer relationship management strategies to everyone. But we don't do the same to everyone, right? We still leverage that customer lifetime value, and the person with the highest customer lifetime value, that's the one I'm going to focus on the most. That's the one that's going to get the majority of my advertising, the majority of my communication, right? If you have a low customer lifetime value, you might get my newsletter, right? You're on my list. I'm giving you a little bit, but I'm not spending a lot of money on you, right? And so we're ratcheting down. Not all consumers are created equal. Now, customer acquisition cost. That's how much it costs you to come on as a new consumer. It's really important to understand customer acquisition costs. And those are not going to stay fixed because it depends on how much money am I spending on advertising. So hypothetically, you could have a customer acquisition cost of like nothing. When you first start, let's say you're first starting, I've got a brand new business. I really don't have any money. And maybe I'm just pushing out my business on my own social media platforms. right? So it's just to my friends and family who know me. And it's just organic posts. I'm not advertising. I'm just pushing out organic things. And so hypothetically, we could argue that there's not any cost. The cost is free because I'm not spending money. Now, the other argument is that it's my time, right? My time is a cost as well. But then of course, if now I've started selling some, I've got a little bit of money for advertising. Now I'm doing some ads, I'm doing some promotions. Now that customer acquisition cost is shifting because I'm spending money on it. Does that make sense? Right. So your customer acquisition cost always has to kind of be recalculated because those numbers are changing.
I just feel like people that like gain somehow larger following on the social media, then they just like start selling things just because like people watch them and it's like so easy for them, so they spend any money.
You're right. I mean, we'd like to think that life is fair, but if I have the luxury of having a large following on social media, I might really benefit. And my customer acquisition cost is low to none because I just benefit from having a large following and people want to hear what I have to say or buy what I'm suggesting, right? There are those people out there, we know they exist, and more power to them, I guess, right? When we all like to be those people. Churn rate. So we think about the funnel. The marketing funnel. Are we familiar with the marketing funnel? Okay, so the marketing funnel is a visual concept of how we get people into our company. So from the beginning, right, that's the awareness. When you're first hearing about me, you're entering into the funnel and you're learning about my product. Maybe you purchase. At the bottom of the funnel, we're actually hoping you never leave the funnel. We don't ever actually want you to jump out. Ideally, you're always stay in the funnel because you're brand loyal. But we know people pop out of the funnel all the time. Maybe I see the ad and I maybe have an interest and maybe I even click through on the ad and I read about it, but I'm like, nope, not for me. I jump before I even purchase. So way at the top, I'm still in awareness and I've jumped out of the funnel. Maybe I buy one time and I hate the product. Now I've jumped out of the funnel there, right? Maybe I was really brand loyal for a long period of time. I was purchasing consistently, and now all of a sudden you haven't seen me for months and months. I popped out. So churn is the number, or the percentage of people that are canceling during any given period. They stop purchasing, they jump out of that funnel. You want to reduce the churn. So CRM, one of CRM's biggest goals is to reduce the churn. And we do that with the constant reconnection, right? That whether it be an ad, a newsletter, whatever, I'm reconnecting with you as a consumer to remind you about my brand, remind you about how wonderful I am, why you should purchase again, and also to incentivize you, right? If you were purchasing consistently and all of a sudden I haven't seen you for a while, it's actually cheaper for me to give you some sort of incentive to come back than to try to get a new consumer, someone who hasn't purchased before, right? To try to get you back into the funnel. So churn rate is important to identify, and we also will kind of stratify the churn rate as to where did you pop out of it, right? Are you someone that was a longtime loyal user that's jumped out of the funnel, or were you kind of just entry level, experienced it and haven't actually purchased? And that's when we go into, for example, the marketing world, we go into like retargeting. And so retargeting is a term that we use in the digital realm a lot, where we can identify those churn rates. And if I know that you've been looking, you haven't actually, like pulled the trigger and bought the product or service, I'm going to retarget you to try to get you back, right? We can also see this in, for example, cart abandon. So that's another type of churn where maybe you're looking and you've heard, how many people cart abandoned? Leave stuff in your cart. Now I have students who tell me that they specifically do it because they know they're leveraging the retargeting and the churn messaging, because they know if I leave this in the cart within a week or so, I'm going to get an email saying, wait, I miss you. Here's 20% off. Hey, you can, why not leverage it, right? So they know the system, they know if they do this, they're going to get that and get it. So they're taking the advantage of that retargeting messaging related to the churn. Is there something on that? Let's see. Oh, that was a message from leadership. I was wondering if that was a question under the pink text. Sorry, I didn't mean to pause for a minute. I wanted to be able to answer it if it was a question. Retention rate, that's the opposite of churn. So how many people am I keeping? And again, we are gonna like tier those. Am I keeping a good chunk of brand loyal consumers that are purchasing on a consistent basis? Or am I losing all of them and I'm just getting now these kind of entry level people that are kind of hanging around? Your average customer lifetime. Now, sometimes people get the average customer lifetime and the lifetime value sort of mixed up, where it's like, isn't that the same? Or, you know, it's very similar terms, but the average customer lifetime is the average amount of time people stay with your brand. Now, it's going to vary. In a new organization, of course, it's going to be very hard to measure average customer lifetime. You haven't been around that long. Right? But we have very good ideas in most organizations. We get a pretty good idea in a very short amount of time how long people tend to stay. Certainly, we know long-standing companies like the Nikes of the world, you could have an average customer lifetime of, you know, dozens of years, decades of years. There can be brand loyal people from, you know, young childhood all the way to end of life with some of those brands because they're so strong. But many companies, it may be 6 months to a year, maybe a couple of years. And that's important because it starts to get you to think about what's the percentage of new consumers that I need on a monthly basis to maintain, because I know, for example, if my average customer lifetime is about a 12-month period, I'm going to be able to figure out how many people do I need to be bringing in on every month to sort of maintain or even to grow. So it's to give you that idea. And then your number of customers is like, how many people am I actually providing services or products to in any given time period, in a week, in a month, in a day, year over year. There. Numbers of transactions. So this is similar to your, you go back to your number of customers, we might think number of transactions, like, isn't that the same, right? Numbers of customers, number of transactions. Well, no, right? So your customers may purchase at different rates. So, you know, if I use the Nike example with my kids, right? Buying shoes. So I'm buying for 3 boys, myself, my husband, right? I'm buying potentially a lot of shoes. Not potentially, I really am buying a lot of shoes all the time. It's ridiculous. So my numbers of transactions with Nike could be exponentially more than yours, right? If you're only buying for yourself, I mean, you might be one of those shoe collectors then maybe your shoes are exponentially more than mine, but you know, it's going to be different, right? And the rate of usage, the rate of consumption can be different. So maybe you're buying on a weekly basis, or I'm buying on a monthly basis, all of these different things. So the number of transactions is really talking about consumption, and consumption is different consumer to consumer. Your total revenue, that's the total amount of money that you've made in any given period, which of course is different from your gross profit, because your total revenue is all the money, but then gross profit is I got to get rid of all my costs, right? So what did I actually take home that I can count as my money? Your average order value. So that's simply like, in general, how much money are people normally spending on my product? And every order, if I average order, you know, people on average spending $5, $10, $50. And that's going to, remember, averages are important, but also sometimes misleading. Because your average, right, cannot take into account outliers. So you may, for example, be selling products that average, let's say, if we go back to like the t-shirt example, $20 shirts. Now, maybe the majority of people are buying 1 or 2 shirts, $20 a pop. But you have an outlier where a company comes in and buys 1,000 shirts. Right now, your average order value is going to shift exponentially, right? Because that one order is gonna be $20,000. Right? And so that's going to shift your average order value for that given period. So always be aware of averages and how they can be misleading based on outliers. Right? Same with your average gross margin. So that's your profit divided by your revenue. Now your gross margin per customer lifespan. Oof. So this is very similar to your customer lifetime value, except that it's taking the margin into account instead of the revenue. So sometimes this can be valuable if you are an organization that works on very tight margins. You guys think of any companies that work on really tight margins?
Restaurants.
Restaurants, of course, that would be one particular. Any others? A lot of retailers actually can work on pretty small margins too. This sort of depends. And the discount rate is the rate of your return on investment. So where is that about? What's my return on investment? Sorry, no wait. What's a return on investment? Yeah.
It's how you can prove that your investment is profitable.
Mhm. What do we look at with return on investment?
Like the ratio, like how much you get, how much you put.
Right, so we're looking at costs, right? Especially like costs of marketing, costs of awareness tactics, things like that versus how much revenue I brought in. So these are 13. There are many metrics. And one of the examples here, I just wanted to show you that sometimes we look at customer lifetime value in different ways and we measure it in different ways. So, for example, this one is showing you your traditional customer lifetime value is your average revenue per user times your gross margin over your churn rate. So that's your kind of traditional way that we think about customer lifetime value. But we also have a predictive and a flexible formula. So anyone want to take a stab at what all these mean? Like these letters. So you have your number of transactions times your average order value times your average gross margin times your average customer lifetime value divided by your number of customers. It's kind of a handful, right? Your flexible lifetime value is your gross margin per customer lifespan times, in quotes, your retention rate divided by 1 plus your discount rate minus your retention rate again. Now, that's a lot. And if you've taken a class with me, you'll know that I'm not somebody that's going to sit here and say, okay, let's figure this out by hand. Because guess what? In the real world, that's not going to happen. I was joking with students that like, you know what, the lights are never going to go off and the power's going to go out and your boss is going to be like, oh my God, quick, we need to know the lifetime value. Figure that out. Like, no, that's never going to happen. It's just not, right? So we let the computers do the work for us. Let's work smarter, not harder. And so there are ways that we can measure growth, oncoming failure, breaking even with resources, right? There are many numbers here. You're already wearing a million hats, so let's use resources for support. How many people have utilized Google Analytics or are familiar with Google Analytics? Now this link teaches you to the Google Analytics Academy, which I am going to use the I should take one break. I'm so sorry. We can take a restroom break. Please, whenever you need to. Okay. Talk amongst yourself for 2 minutes. I'm so sorry. Apologies. Sometimes all that coffee, it just hit me out like. So. Where was I? So resources, Google Analytics. And again, I'm going to make sure that these slides get shared out. So you'll have resources, and that's why I made them so text heavy. So you have that resource, but also these hyperlinks. So Google Analytics is actually going to the Google Analytics Academy page. The reason that I link that, and actually some of my undergrads will tell you that I make them take the certifications and get certified in Google Analytics. It's important. It helps you understand how to utilize the platform, because quite frankly, you go into Google Analytics, you've never utilized it, and it's like, what is happening? What is this? How do I leverage this dashboard? What is it saying? And the fact that they have the Academy now is an amazing resource. So it self-teaches you. So you go in and there's videos and different resources to self-pace and teach yourself how to utilize it and leverage the dashboard to your benefit, which is huge. I remember when Google Analytics launched, and when it first launched, there was no user training. There was no, I mean, we were just sort of like naive marketers in the dark, trying to figure out how to use it to our benefit. So huge, huge benefit. And honestly, it's not lip service to say, I know a lot of you are thinking about how do I start my own company, but it's not lip service to say that having those certifications and putting them on your resume does carry weight. In the marketing world, if I am looking for a marketing job and I have that knowledge and that value, it is a value add on your resume. So I do encourage you to check it out. They are shifting. If you're not familiar, does anyone know that Google is shifting their platform? Yes, are you familiar? So Google has made different shifts to their algorithm over the years, and they're never going to tell you all of it, right? Because that would impact SEO. And to be honest, they actually recently acknowledged that their algorithm is now managed so solely by their AI that they actually don't know the algorithm specifically anymore themselves. Terrified, right? So they have they've shifted and overhauled Google Analytics, which is going to make it much more user friendly. So they're calling it G4. So this academy now links you to the G4 platform to learn G4. And so what that basically means is, in the past, Google Analytics had all of this ability to pull data in. So not only can it look if I have digital ads, SEO ads, but I can pull in if I'm doing Facebook, Instagram, any social media platform, I'm doing ads on there, I can pull those in. I can track website action interactions, right? How they do that is it's called, I can drop a pixel, or I can drop, so it's essentially like a cookie, right, onto different specific pages. I can drop them onto landing pages, and it can track all of this data and where people are going, where they're coming from, right? You can bring it all in together. But in the past, you figured out how to bring it all in together, but then you sort of had to figure out, like, what's valuable here? Like, what am I trying to track? And you had to create those dashboards yourself. And there was a lot of trial and error in the marketing world to try to figure out, like, what metric was valuable metrics. But their new G4 platform is going to implement a lot more machine learning, which is going to be a lot better for you guys moving forward, because it's going to give you suggestions. It's going to say, hey, I'm seeing a lot of asset sale information. Have you considered looking at your cost per customer? Have you looked at your acquisition rates? Like, we think you should measure this. So it's going to give you some better tips and sort of suggestions as to what would be valuable based on the data that you're pulling. And then on the flip side, if you're trying to measure something, let's say you're trying to measure churn rate, but it's not giving you that, it may tell you, you know, I don't have data on that. I'm not seeing that. What you need to provide to me is, you know, this item. I need to be able to see this part of the funnel. I don't see it, right? And so then you're able to feed it. Oh, I'm not giving it sales information. I'm not feeding my sales data up into Google Analytics, right? So it's going to be a lot more user friendly and responsive to you, which is wonderful. But you can learn how to utilize it on the Academy platform now. So I encourage you guys to check it out. It's not like super time intensive. You can do it in a couple of hours, right? So something to think about. HubSpot. So remember, of course, Salesforce is here as well. Salesforce as well has an academy They are willing to teach you. This is recent. They didn't used to like to give you information about how Salesforce worked if you weren't buying the platform. But they also realized that if I can train people to utilize it, I might actually have an advantage in increasing my sales. Because as you can imagine, right? If I'm trained, let's say in Salesforce, and I go work for a company that's not utilizing a CRM platform, be like, hey, Salesforce is a great product, like we should consider it, right? So they realized providing free education was actually a huge word of mouth subscription tool for them. So if you have interest in Salesforce, you can actually use their academy and learn how to utilize their tools. They do have, and they're starting to try to be competitive with the HubSpots of the world. They have kind of a freemium type feeling to them, and that they've ramped up and tiered up their services to try to help entrepreneurs, nonprofits be able to afford their services. So it is something you can look at. HubSpot, though, would be the one that's sort of always been freemium. So they have a free initial CRM platform that they provide to anyone and everyone. And then they tier up costs based on sort of add-ons and things. They also, everyone is getting into these academies. So they also have an academy. And a lot of these tools give you additional things. Like, for example, have any of you struggled or not familiar with doing a digital ad? Like, how many people have actually put up a digital ad for something? A couple of you, yeah. Used Google, I'm assuming. Facebook, okay. Facebook. TikTok, okay. So you've done some social media platform ads. And the Facebook platform is very similar to the Google platform and how it works. For those people who aren't familiar, right? If I'm going to do an ad on Facebook or Instagram, I'm going to go to, now it's the Meta Business Manager. If I'm going to do a larger just display ad, the digital ad, I'm going to go to Google Ads. And it's going to walk me through, it's going to ask me, right, like demographic questions, who am I trying to target, psychographic information, right? I can give it all these details so that it targets the people I want it to target. And then I'm going to upload the ad, whether that just be a static image, if it's a video, whatever. And then there's going to be a fee. Does anyone know how those fees work?
Lifetime of depend, like how you want to set it up.
There's all different, right? So there's different ways that we can set it up. So I can set up like a lifetime cost. So that might be, I have $1,000 to spend on this ad. So that's the lifetime spend on the ad. Or I can do it on like a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Like I can spend $100 a week. And sometimes it could be $1 million, right? Depending on the company, I could be spending a lot of money on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. So I'm going to give it that parameters, and it's also going to give me then parameters on what the cost per ad is. Do you know how they charge you for those costs? How does an ad get charged back to me?
Sometimes it's the click-through rate.
So typically, traditionally, it is still the click-through rate. Sometimes you can opt for the cost per acquisition, but traditionally still. So what's the difference between click-through rate and a cost per acquisition? Does anyone know?
Is click-through like just simply getting a click, like at a specific cost, but like acquisition, like they need to actually buy something and then like at a specific cost?
Yes. Now, acquisition, we do a little bit of asterisk is that acquisition traditionally means that I purchased, but I could say, I could just identify that acquisition or that conversion as, maybe I just want you to like put your email on the newsletter, right? It could be like filling a form. It might just be some type of activity. It's not necessarily a purchase. And sometimes we do that because we're just simply in the awareness raising phase. So we're just trying to like grow awareness of our brand. We're not necessarily at the point where we're trying to make sales yet. So you have to weigh the pros and cons about if you want to pay cost, click-through rate costs or cost per acquisition. Cost per acquisition tends to be higher per cost, but some people weigh that like, oh, well, I'll save in the end because it's only the people I'm actually converting or having acquisition. There's several schools of thought as to whether or not that's actually true. So the click-through rate tends to still be the one that most people utilize. And so maybe you have to vary in our cost. Maybe your click-through rate's a couple pennies per click, maybe it's several dollars. It depends on the product, the keywords, all of these different things. So if you are unfamiliar with digital ads, you're unfamiliar with any of those things, actually within like HubSpot, Google Analytics, even in Salesforce, they have other sub courses where they can teach you and like give you that information and familiarize you with how do I put a digital ad? How do I create an SEO ad? How do I do all of these different things? So there are a lot of resources out there to help you with these different pieces of your advertising, which is going to be critical for success and also critical for being able to measure your success, your unit economics and the metrics that you need in order to know that you're being successful, right? Also POS systems, there are tons of them. We've talked a little bit about them and given some examples like the Toast, Square, Shopify, right? Those are three of the big ones. A lot of them have dashboards built in, have a lot of data metrics now. They're really trying to operate like CRM systems. And there's a lot of benefit there because it's point of sale already. So it's like bundled all together. And then social media platforms have inbuilt metrics. Does anyone know what the difference between inbuilt metrics is versus like using Google Analytics?
Like the ones that they call themselves, like daily active users, monthly active users.
Yes, so inbuilt is just the metrics related to that platform. So I could go to Facebook, for example, and I can see the engagement and the likes and the click-throughs and the shares and all of the data metrics about Facebook if I wanted to. And then I could go to Instagram, I could go to TikTok, right? So those are in suite, so they're inbuilt in that system. It's great when you're just starting out. Sometimes if I'm just using one platform, that's all I need. But funneling them up into Google Analytics, for example, or into a CRM system allows you to get a much bigger, broader view of what your consumers are doing. One note to be aware of is, depending on how you feel about Meta and Facebook, they actually are shifting their platform to try to compete with Google Analytics. So they no longer are solely an inbuilt platform. You can actually funnel all the same information that you can funnel into Google Analytics into Facebook. Or I guess Meta, I still can't get used to that name, and utilize it that way. So it's just, that's just a preference tool. Any questions on the platforms? It's a lot. What questions? We just have a little bit of time left. Is there questions I can answer? I wanted to save some time for questions, concerns, thoughts. Yeah.
I guess I have a question based on your experience, that you had. Where do you think the logistic part where the companies should come into play at at what point, right? Because I feel like a lot of companies spend 3 months designing a logo or think about the logo, and they spend not even 3 days or 3 hours about their website's going to go down, or what happens if they sell the product, or how to handle the inventory, etc. So I was just wondering if you could maybe comment on at what point you consider that, or is that maybe too much to do that too early, or so.
No, that's a great question. And what I think you really have to think about too, and sometimes we get lost on, is the customer experience. Sometimes, companies, they get really focused on I got to make this perfect brand, right? And they spend all this time designing the logo and all the different pieces because, you're invested in it, right? It's sort of like your baby and you're really involved in it and you love it, but we lose sight of the customer journey. And so it's really important to be aware of that customer journey all the time from the beginning to say go. Now, yes, logistically, I might not need to be worried about selling out before I'm ready to sell, but we want to be, forecasting out, okay, if this is what I'm thinking about, if this is a customer journey, what if I go to we're going to sell online, let's say. So they go on and they put in an order and they're expecting a 24-hour turnaround, but now it's going to be months. What's that going to look like? Anybody have an experience like that where they, thought they were getting something within, a short turnaround time and then there was major delays?
I ordered something from Amazon and they came from China, so it's like months.
Yeah, we do see that on Amazon sometimes, depending upon the product, and it can shift your opinion, right, and your desire to purchase that in the future, right? And you have to be able to pivot. The founder of Tom's, you guys familiar with Tom's shoes? Right, so he was hugely entrepreneurial. He's a very interesting story. Like, he's been on tons of podcasts, so he's like very funny to listen to, and he's come up with all kinds of companies that have been successful. But Tom's actually happened to sort of organically. He was down in South America. He the shoes that he sells, like that style of shoe, were just like really, everybody wore them. They were just sort of like your summer shoe, right? And they were little like mom and pop shoe stores that made these, and he just loved them, and he bought a bunch of them to just bring home to friends. But everybody, when he brought them home to friends, everyone loved them, and that's when he was like, ooh, this could be something. So he went down to those cobblers, right, and he was like, hey, I want to sell your shoes. And so they were like, yes, like, let's do it. But he opened up a website, right, and the orders were like flooding in, and he was overwhelming the cobblers at first, like, and there was these huge delays where you might have been ordering your shoes early days and you were waiting like months to actually get them, and that was really problematic. So he had to quickly find a way to fund and pivot in order to be, keep those because part of it was that he was trying to help these business people, these independent business owners, these cobblers. He wasn't trying to just steal from them, right? He wasn't trying to take over, but he had to find a way to exponentially grow in order to feed the requests, right? And he had to do that very quickly. And so you want to be able to be thinking ahead. And I think, for him, he kind of fell into that particular venture, and he wasn't necessarily thinking about the size and scope. And so he sort of had those troubles, but that could have quickly shut down his business, and Tom's would have not been what it is today. But because he had so many successes, I think he was able to quickly pivot and sort of resolve the distribution and the access problems. But yeah, you want to think about those quickly, because if your consumer has a bad experience, it's very hard to bring them back, right? And you can have the like mea culpa, like, we're brand new, we're just trying to figure things out, right? We're a new company. And some people might be like, that, okay, fine, I'll try again. And other people will be like, too bad, so sad. Like, if you're doing it this, like, how do I expect you're gonna be better in the future, right? So you do want to think about those things from the beginning. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so what do you think based on your experience, or like in your opinion, separates the successful entrepreneurs versus the ones that are unsuccessful and never get started? You have to identify one, like, the most important thing.
I would have to say resilience, and resilience in a couple of ways. Like, resilience in that I'm almost like Teflon in hearing like no, and hearing bad things about, like, oh, I don't like, and not that I'm ignoring it, not that I'm not doing anything about it, but that I'm not taking it personally, right? Because not everyone's going to love my product or service. Not everybody's going to want to fund me. There's going to be plenty of no's, but a lot of entrepreneurs, they can't, it becomes like a personal attack, and it actually, it becomes a problem, and they can't move past it. So being resilient and hearing no, knowing that's going to happen, and not letting it stop you, but also being resilient in being objective and understanding that, like, if I'm hearing no, like, maybe I need to make some pivots. I need to be open to change. Like, I'm not so sold on my idea that I can't move or modify or look at it from a different light. So being that resilient person is really, really important.
In general, like, out of all the topics you covered today, what do you think are like the most important? Just like to pick like maybe like a couple, like one or two.
In all honesty, if I had to think about what was super important for an entrepreneur, it's about that value proposition, understanding your value proposition and figuring out how to effectively deliver that to your customer. And I say that in entrepreneurial classes, in marketing classes, and everything, because if you do not understand your value proposition and your customer doesn't understand your value proposition, then you're dead in the water. Why do I buy? Why should I buy from you? What's the why? Right? So that's a critical piece. And it's critical to keep in mind, because sometimes that value proposition sort of becomes lip service. And that's when you see companies really like divert and go off kilter. And it usually doesn't work well for them when that happens. It becomes a problem and they have to reorient themselves. Right now, companies that can stay very true to their value proposition can have a lot of stuff happen, but it doesn't hurt them. And so, not to like exhaust Nike. I know I've talked about Nike. You're like, is that our favorite brand? But you think about Nike. Now, yes, Nike is so large that in some ways we think like, could they fail? But their value proposition about being innovative, about being accessible, but being about brand, a big part of that is like they know who they stand for and what they want to push forward, and they have done a lot with pushing forward equity in sports and equity just in life. So if we look back at like the Colin Kaepernick ad, anybody remember when Nike sponsored Colin Kaepernick for a long time, but when his ad first dropped, that was when he was kneeling in the NFL games, and there was a lot of controversy about that. And Nike said, you know what, we're standing behind him because this is about equity and about rights, and we support them, but they knew it was going to be controversial. They knew that that was going to happen. They knew that when they pushed that out, there was going to be a population that was going to be really upset. And we saw it. We saw it on social media. We saw it everywhere. People were burning Nikes. Ironically, people were going and buying Nikes to burn them. Funny, right? But we saw this. But you know what? Nike stayed true to their value proposition. They stayed true. They knew who their consumer was. They knew that their consumer would support them. They knew that their consumer would say, we agree and we align with this. It is about equality. It is about being able to stand up with your voice. And so what happened? Well, they survived it and excelled from it and profited from it. In fact, their profit margins exponentially rose right after that ad dropped, and then kind of leveled off to their normal levels, but they've only exceeded their margins after doing that. So if you understand inherently your value proposition and who your consumer is, you will be in a very good position. Everything else is important too, but those are really critical.
One question, the MVP needs to go also aligned with the value proposition, right? And in customer development, and how long do you think it will take you to understand more where is your MVP in order to keep going moving forward? Because that's the part that always challenging to get into, have a minimum value proposition. So
right. And so it varies in every product, right? And so for example, I told you guys about how like at Kapiolani, we initially with that app, we literally just like mocked up visuals and we had paper visuals initially, and that was our MVP. And then we moved to like a beta product. And then, we kept having these iterations of what the MVP looks like. Now we could do that because our consumer base, right? These were pregnant moms. At that, there was a understanding about apps. There was there was a level of knowledge where I could give you a visual and you would be able to work with that, right? And you could give me good feedback. But if your product is something that's really not already well understood, you're going to have more of a true conceptualization that shows me what happens. So, for example, I have a friend who is an entrepreneur, and he has a really cool product in measuring like echocardiograms. And so this was starting several years ago. Now they're starting to do it where they can actually do it on your phone, but this was sort of in the interim period. And so the concept of being able to have this tiny portable thing that could measure, right, like your heartbeats, and if you were having a heart attack, huge value to ambulances and EMS people. But we didn't think about that. I mean, that machine has been very big traditionally in the past, like that's not a portable thing. And so it was really hard for people, even in the medical field, to sort of conceptualize like, what would that look like? Like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea, but like, I don't know. So he had to come, right? So he had to come up with a little kind of more actual working prototype as his MVP. He couldn't just have this like paper concept because he had to show them what this might look like, right? So it sort of depends on your company or organization and where the consumer knowledge base is at the time for anything that you're trying to push out. Thank you. All right, other questions? Are you guys ready for lunch? So you're telling me yes? I'm happy to answer.
Anyway, sorry, I'm getting huge value out of this. So appreciate your time. Yeah.
No.
You know, so like when we were talking about the influences and what that's heading and etc. So how would you, for like a lot of the companies that are like they're just starting up, they're like stranded for money, right? So like how would you approach these influencers, right? So it sounds like you cannot go after the ones that are massively popular, right? That like Kardashians, but then these small niche, like influencers, how do you seek out? Is there anything that you would advise, like in terms of like how to communicate to them, or is it just a matter of giving them free products and hey, this will look great in your hand, or like how would you leverage that to your advantage?
So there's sort of two ways that you can go about it. So one, you want to think about where does my product live, like who is my, right, who your consumer is and like where is my consumer. And sometimes we actually go on to like even niche social media platforms. So like to give the example of Strava. Is anybody on Strava or familiar with Strava? Strava is a small social media app for like working out. So, if any of you have friends that are on like social, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, maybe you see that post where it's like, I ran a marathon, like, woo, right? And they like get pumped up about that. But if you saw them like every day posting like my 5-mile run, my 6 mile, you'd be like, could you be quiet enough already? Like, I'm over it. Like, woohoo, great that you ran. We don't care, right? Like, right? It's one thing to post my like medal and my race, but every day, like enough already, we get it. Well, Strava is the place where we can do that, right? So Strava is popular. It's basically Facebook for working out. So you post your workout and then you can get your kudos from your workout friends. So if I'm like Lululemon or Athletica or some product that's trying to sell to someone who's interested in working out, that's a social media platform I want to be on. And potentially that's where I'm going to find my influencer, right? So one, I got to think about what platform I want to be on. And then how do I want to reach out to them? There's sort of two schools of thought. One, I can reach out like in the DM, the direct message type of way. So, I look through and I identify and I think, oh, you're going to be perfect. You meet my customer base, your profile, everything, right? So I might DM you directly and say, hey, I have a small company, right? And maybe I offer like, I don't have any money, but I can offer you free product. Like, would you be willing? And maybe we just have that conversation. That's one way. And that's really how it started. But there's actually now, and I can send links, I don't have them in here, but there's actually sort of a third-party vendors that have popped up that basically, if you're an influencer, you can be on those platforms and you're like, hey, I'm a momfluencer and here's my profile. And then you as as someone looking for an influencer can come in and say like, I'm looking for this type of person. And then it shoots me out a list and I can see, and then I can reach out through that third-party vendor. So there is actually like connection spaces now for that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no. So, anything else I can help with? All right, well, thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate you listening to me blabber on for all this time. So enjoy your lunch.
I'll probably first just start with maybe a little bit more in-depth introduction. Joanne, maybe you can start and tell them what you do on a day-to-day basis.
So I'm a commercial credit manager at American Savings Bank. Pretty much daily, I'm in meetings with loan officers like Kyle. They're deal screening all their deals from different companies that want to get loans with us, or they have special requests. So we meet with the officers, we talk about their loan, structure loans. And then the other side of it, I'm meeting with the analysts who underwrite all the deals to see if it works. We can lend money to them, looking at their cash flow. Oh, so underwriting, the analysts will take a look at the company's financial statements. to see what's going on with the business, how they're doing. They'll analyze the cash flow, which we'll talk about today, and to see if they can repay the loan to the bank. They'll also ask questions, so they'll work closely with the loan officers to ask the company questions to get more information about what's going on with the company. And then, aside from working with the analysts, once the loans are ready for approval, the loans will come through and we'll take a look at it and we'll approve the loans and give it back to the officers. They can go back to the company and say their deal is approved.
Sounds kind of boring. They have fun.
It's very interesting looking at all the different types of businesses. Every business is different, so there's pretty much no business that's the same. So it's pretty interesting sometimes.
Yes. So I'm Kyle. I started in credit, so that's how I got my start. But I found myself wanting to be social and take customers out, or just do the social part of the banking. So I was going to go crazy if I was relegated to a desk, crunching numbers and analyzing cash flows all the time. So that's primarily what I do. Think of me as like a point person. So business will come to me, and if they need deposit services or cash management services, fraud services, right? You want to make sure you have security over your cash. But most of the time it's loans. Most of the time they want to buy something, buy equipment, acquire another business, or they need a line of credit to help with their working capital cycle. So you're like buy inventory and all that, which we'll go into. I don't want to have you explain that today.
Now that you've been here, probably open view that.
Thank you once again for being here.
All right, so I know we just had lunch and full knack attack, and I'm about to lull you to sleep with numbers, but yeah, this is what we're going to go over today. So cash flow basics, really the construction of a cash flow financial statement, or just the ins and outs, right? Give you a better handle on that. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. EBITDA. Just maybe show of hands. Who here? Who here is this? This is the first time to hear the word or term EBITDA. Dang. Okay. Yeah, they don't teach you anything at school. Okay, so EBITDA is a very common metric for operating cash flow. It's a rough measure of cash flow that is used widely in the real world. So we're going to go over that, and then we're going to kind of go over examples and applications of how we do use it. We're going to talk about cash conversion cycle. Anybody heard that term before? Basically, how long does it take to turn your sale into actual cash? And then we're going to go over a case study. It's going to be an eye test. Warn you. All right, what's on your mind? So this is what we had set to go over, but if there's anything anyone here has that you want us to try to touch on or go over, we just want to hear it now, and we can kind of jot it down, and maybe we'll go over it. Hopefully we do, but does anyone have anything specific?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this for like a normal person, or like what you're going over? Is this like life advice, or is this for somebody that is looking to go into what you're doing? Why are you teaching this?
So this is anybody that has a business or wants to start a business, and to understand cash flow of a business. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the context.
Got it.
Thank you, Lauren. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah.
If you have time, I'd like to hear more about like differences with LLC versus corporation, like C Corp.
Okay.
Like LLC versus startup, right? Like Delaware C Corp type of thing.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
In terms of cash flow and taxes and all that.
Yeah.
There's some.
C Corp, you're going to be subject to double tax if you dividend, right? So that's kind of maybe the quick answer. But yeah, thanks. We'll go over that a little bit, or I'll try to fold it in. Anyone else? Okay, so cash flow basics. Literally, to keep it really simple, it's movement of cash. It's tracking cash that comes in and cash that goes out. And that may not be so simple sometimes when you're dealing with revenues and you're not collecting on your revenue. So we're going to talk about a cash flow statement. It's one of the 3 key financial statements. So in your business, you're going to have a P&L statement. and a balance sheet. And the third one is going to be a cash flow statement, which is derived from the first two. So it's really a complement to the balance sheet and the income statement. It's going to summarize your cash movements in 3 key areas. Basically, this is kind of like accounting 101 a little bit. So you're going to have an operating, right, cash flow statement that's going to go over the sales of goods and services, your expenses, your wages, your rent if you pay that, your supplier payments. Next one's going to be investing, right? So if you buy equipment, right, or if you're going to have some R&D expense potentially for maybe a software, something like that, or maybe you're going to purchase pizza oven, make pizzas. The last part is the financing, right? Cash in and out from a bank. Maybe you take a loan, then maybe you're repaying that loan. Maybe your family or your seed investors, right? They're going to give you money to start your business, whatever that is, and then you're going to pay them back. So the plus and minus of that, and that's the same here, right? If you were to sell some equipment, you would get proceeds from that. Any questions? Falling asleep already? All right. Okay, probably can't see it up here, but this is EBITDA. So earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So what I did was I created this fictitious P&L statement basically. So yeah, chocolate cafe, right? Sales, cost of goods sold, that's your inputs, right? You sell it and then you got to pay comp and benefits if you have staff, if you have rent, depreciation, we'll get to that. Yes.
So what is amortization?
So, thank you. So I highlighted depreciation and amortization. Those are non-cash expenses. So I'm going to punt amortization to Joanne. So when you have an asset, like let's say you buy an oven, pizza oven, and you depreciate that asset, right? It's a non-cash expense. Same thing basically applies for amortization for different types of assets. So goodwill is probably a common one. I know that might be a little bit more complicated, but if you bought something and you bought it more than the value of the asset, the price difference between what the book value and what you paid, that's going to be goodwill, and you can amortize that on your P&L statement. So that becomes an expense, but it's not cash. So that's why we're going to look at earnings before that amount. You want to chime in on that one?
I talked about amortizing with you kind of mentioned the amortization,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. It's probably something that's going to show up less, maybe on your P&L statement. It just depends on the type of asset and what qualifies to be amortized. That's where you get your accounting involved. But the key takeaway here, right, is we have our P&L statement. You got revenues, you got expenses, and you get to your bottom line net income. But we're trying to find EBITDA. So what we're going to do is we're going to take earnings and we're going to add back all of the, well, I can't see it up there, but we're going to add back basically interest. So we're going to take that, add interest, expense. So if it's so EBIT, so we're on the T part, you're going to add back taxes. And then I lumped in depreciation and amortization together. That's very common. You're going to add those back. And that's going to get you your EBITDA. So we use this a lot. We use this a lot every single day. When we get a business and they give us their P&L, we are basically dissecting their profit and loss statement to get that number. And we want that number because we want to see what their operating cash flow, again, it's a rough measure of cash flow, is. And the reason why we do that, the reason why it's a rough measure of cash flow is because your sales, we don't know if you got your sales all in cash. If you're using an accrual method, we don't know if that's all cash sales. Same thing for cost of goods sold. We don't know if you paid all your vendors. We're going to see that on the balance sheet movement. But that's why it's a rough measure of cash flow, because it's not going to be that accurate, but it's going to give us a good ballpark. Okay, so EBITDA in the real world. So literally the bank, we are looking at this, businesses look at this, private equity investors, they're always looking at EBITDA for most private businesses. So what it is, it's a normalized cash flow metric, agnostic to tax and capital structure. So If you notice, what we did was we added taxes back. So. What's your name?
Oh, my name's Kazuki.
Kazuki.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kazuki, so we're trying to figure out what the business operating cash flow is. Doesn't matter if you're an LLC or a C corp or an S corp, because we're trying to basically be immune to that, to see, okay, what kind of cash flow is this thing throwing off? And we're gonna set aside the tax implications later on. Because it could be an S corp, maybe it flows up to you individually and you pay tax, could be an LLC and it's taxed at the member level instead of the corporate level. There's a lot of things that can happen on the tax side. Business valuations, multiple of EBITDA, it's very common. So if you have a small business, maybe it might be valued at 3 or 4 times EBITDA, that's a fairly common multiple. As you grow the business and it gets bigger, you might get 7, 8, 9 times multiple. To keep it simple, we see that happen all the time. A business, investors bought it at 5 times, they grew it, they sold it at 10 or 11 times. Yeah. So understanding the multiple of EBITDA can be a proxy of what your company is valued. Lending, we're not really going to lend you more than 3 times EBITDA, unless we have collateral like good property security or something like that. So this is also a limit of your sort of leverage tolerance, and it's a good practice for every single one of you to know that metric so that you're not over levered. Debt to EBITDA. So yeah, we'll loan you at 3 times EBITDA, but what if you have other debt? What if you have capital lease obligations or other things on there? So we're going to look at the whole entire debt picture against what your EBITDA is. And again, that's going to fluctuate from year to year. If you're growing, then this number may come down. If you're weakening and your EBITDA is starting to get smaller, but your debt's big, heading towards bankruptcy. And then we use it to evaluate loan repayment capacity. So what Joanna was saying earlier, we look at, can you service your debt? Can you pay it back?
Where are these numbers coming from? Like the 3x, I agree with that,
Yeah,
and the 9x, you with that for the business valuation, where are those going?
sure. So this one, I would say, is a guideline of what we as a bank will lend. And I'm speaking probably in generalities that most banks are probably going to lend not more than 3 times. Depends on the industry. So let's say you have a really good business with strong recurring cash flow that's very reliable. We may say, okay, maybe we'll lend you a little bit more. Maybe we'll lend you 4 times. This number was completely subjective and just for illustrative purposes. The 9 times EBITDA is going to really depend on what business you have. So for example, right, if you're a software business, you're going to be valued much higher multiple. Normally those are multiples of revenue, not even EBITDA. But same thing, if you have a business with super high margins, very profitable, very strong barriers to entry, recurring revenue stream, you're going to get a high multiple. If you're in a business that low barriers to entry, more of a commodity, maybe you have a shave ice, shop or something like that, it makes a lot of profit, but that's not a very defensible business. That's going to be a lower multiple.
So are you guys the ones like evaluating these companies and like coming up with this number, or are they giving you data to support that?
Yeah, good question. If we have like a private equity sponsor that's going to buy a business, they'll be giving us that data. We can do our own research to try to qualify that to see what's reasonable. But ultimately, we're gonna cap at 3 times EBITDA. And we just know that business valuation is likely going to be north of 3 times, most likely. But we do want to know what the value may be, because when we make a loan, we want your house, capital stock, your unborn child. So, we're going to try to take as much collateral as we can. So we do evaluate that. So say company, private equity investor, is going to come in and say, we're going to buy this business. We're going to know what the value is because they're buying it. We're going to see, okay, company makes this EBITDA, you're paying, say it makes $1 million of EBITDA and they're paying $10 million, they're paying 10x. So we know that, we can see that. So, yeah, thanks, good question. Anything else? All right, working capital, conversion cycle. Okay, so this one's important for you guys to conceptually understand, not necessarily do some arithmetic, but basically it's your cash conversion cycle. And there's a formula here. It's your inventory days plus your accounts receivable days minus your AP days. I don't really want you to memorize that. It's just, you should know, and there's formulas to help you figure this out. You can Google it. how long does it take you to basically turn a sale into cash? But the takeaway here, and this is the example, so say you sold a shoe, I should use different. There, do that 3 times fast. Oh, shoot. So you're gonna collect on it after 5 days, okay? You gotta pay your vendor, right, where you got the materials from, you gotta pay them at some point, but you're gonna pay them on the 10th day. So you ordered the materials, you didn't pay for it yet, you got it, then you sold the shoe, you got your money. So basically you got cash and you didn't have to pay your vendor yet. So that's like trade credit, you're basically using your vendors, right, to hold cash. So the timing difference, right? You collected that cash and you didn't have to pay that out yet. So that's important. If you understand your cash cycle, that can give you some advantages in your business and maybe lessen borrowing from the bank, because you're going to borrow basically from your vendors interest free. Now, there are discounts and incentives to pay your vendors back, so you have to evaluate if that's worth it. But that should be part of your thinking as a business owner. Okay, so Starbucks, I put Starbucks on here as an example because they do the exact opposite. They're leveraging all of you, all the consumers' cash. They're like the worst bank in the world. When you go on their app, who here buys Starbucks coffee? Anyone? 1, 2, 3. You have money on their app? You do, right? So what is that money doing? Starbucks has it. They're just holding it. They could do whatever they want with it. They could buy another property, right? They could put it in stock investments. So they're holding your cash. Are they paying you any interest? No. So they're basically doing the reverse, right? They're leveraging you as a consumer. You haven't even bought the goods yet, and you're giving them money. All right, case study time. So this is how I feel when so this is gonna be the eye test. So we're gonna, at least somebody, I found it funny. Yeah. Okay. So we got to pivot out of the spreadsheet. So everybody got this piece of paper? Oh, okay. Did we print more? All right, so let's see here. Oh, yeah, here we go. Okay, Hawaii Apparel Company. They're so creative on the name. Startup retail clothing business offering men's and women's apparel and accessories. Competitive advantage is that their clothing is made from ultra lightweight flowing materials that offer UV protection and is perfect casual and semi-casual wear to feel comfortable in the Hawaii heat. Probably didn't make a lot of sales the last 2 weeks. It's been cold and rainy. Company secured $200,000 in investor capital to get the business off the ground, hoping to turn a profit in the 3-year time horizon. The founder will use the investment to locate space, purchase equipment, hire staff, design and build up apparel, create a website, advertise. We went with a brick and mortar. It's honestly the easiest one. I was thinking about doing an automated YouTube channel. Okay, so where's the money going? So this is what you guys got to think about as you think about your idea, right? Where is the money going? So 74,000 purchase equipment, leasehold improvements, right? They got a store, they need to likely paint walls, get some fixtures in there, hangers, showcase your apparel. Inventory purchase, right? You got something to start, permitting, licensing, insurance fees, signage, website development, marketing, retail point of sale, right? Their merchant processing, Square, Clover, what other brands are out there, but yeah. Working capital startup, you probably need a little bit of cash on your balance sheet. Okay. All right. So we're going to get out of this. And we're going to go into
signage.
Sorry?
What is a signage?
Signage like on the outside of your store.
Um,
I assume that's what Andrew meant.
I think so.
We have another individual that helped prepare this wonderful case study. Okay, so hang on here. All right. Can you see this?
It's big enough.
That's what I meant about the eye test.
Okay, so this top part right here, this is basically a summary of your P&L statement. So you'll see your revenues, your expenses, how much you're making, and your sales, revenues minus cost of goods sold, and then your interest expense, cash for taxes, and then you come up with this number, net income. So for year one, you see you just started your business, you made 28,000 in revenue. You made a gross profit, so that's good. It's a small gross profit, but still, that's a positive number, so that's a good sign. You had some expenses, so expenses of 65,500. You have some startup expenses, you had to purchase equipment, advertising, so your expenses is quite large in year one. Then you had interest expense because you have to borrow some money to help finance some of these expenses. So you ended up with a net loss of $64,000. So this is your P&L statement.
Lost money.
So we want to take a look at how much cash that is, because it may not necessarily mean you spent 64,000 in cash. So we'll come down to this part on the bottom, and this is one of the cash flow statements that Kyle mentioned earlier. So there's three different types of activities. We have our operating activities, we have investing activities, and financing activities. So first we'll take a look at our operating activities, and we basically will take the net income or loss number from your P&L statement as our starting point. So we have there that it's a net loss of 64,000. We'll add back the depreciation, because remember, depreciation is not a cash item. So you're not really paying depreciation, money's not going out of the company for it. It's just you spent money on your equipment and you kind of depreciate it over the years. For example, you purchase a car, you drive off the lot, the value of your car is no longer the same what you paid for it. So it's kind of like that, it depreciates. After that, we'll take a look at your inventory, accounts receivable, the changes in that, because we want to see what cash you're getting, your source of cash and your use of cash. So here, they're both negative for accounts receivable and inventory. So that means you used your cash, money went out of the company because you had to pay for inventory, and your accounts receivable, you made sales, but you didn't collect on all of them. So you didn't get cash for all of your sales. So that was a use of cash.
Does everyone understand that concept? Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Then we'll take a look at accounts payable. So as Kyle mentioned before about the cash conversion cycle, you're using your vendors. So your company owes your vendors $2,000. So that means you still have $2,000 in the company, but you still have to pay them, but you're kind of leveraging it. So that's why it's positive, and it's considered a source of cash. So we'll add that back. And for our operating activities, used cash of $129,000. So how are we going to finance that operating activities? So we take a look at investing activities. Investing activities are things that you purchase your equipment. So we didn't get any source of cash from investing activities because money went out of the company to purchase our equipment. So we used $74,000 for that. Our financing activities, this is where our source of funds are going to come from to pay for our investing activities and our operating activities. So as you can see, you raised $200,000 from capital investment, and then the company went to the bank and got a line of credit to pay for some of these expenses, and they actually drew $3,000 from their line of credit to help pay for some of these expenses.
Yep. We all have that house that we can leverage for a line of credit, right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm just joking there, because that is what's difficult with startup businesses is banks are rarely going to be the financiers for that, unless personally you have the asset base to cover, so I would, if I did have a property, I would most likely be using my home equity line to fund my business, which is a non-permitted use. I forgot we're recording this. That's just where you don't tell anyone that you did that. Yeah. Okay, so year two. So what's happening in year two, right? Revenue is gaining traction, company improved its gross margin. They purchased new materials from vendors, they received discounts. And we're gonna go over that, still. Take it away, John, sorry.
So as you can see, you grew your revenues, you're in business for a year, going on 2 years, so that's great improvement. As you can see, your gross profit increased as well. You're now at a 35% gross profit. And that's most likely due to vendor discounts. You have more buying power, or you could have found a new vendor that gives you better pricing. And then, as you can see, your expenses went down because you had large expenses in year one to start up the business. So those necessarily aren't recurring expenses that you should expect to keep paying every year. So your expenses went down, your interest expense went up. You most likely had to borrow a little bit more money to pay for something. And we still reported a net loss. However, the net loss is less than year number one. So we'll take a look at the operating activities again. We add back depreciation once again. And then we still are using cash for our accounts receivable and inventory, because as you grow your business, you need to keep purchasing more inventory so you can make more sales. Accounts receivable, you're not collecting everything in cash, so you still have some outstanding receivables from your customers. Accounts payable, we're leveraging our vendors, so we're not paying them on day one, right when we purchase it. So you're making sales, but you're not paying them for a little bit. So that's a source of cash. We add back $8,000. We still made some purchases of equipment. It could have been, maybe you needed to upgrade a system or purchase more fixtures in the store to showcase your apparel. So there's still some type of purchase for equipment, but not as much as the first year. So how are we going to pay for those operating activities and investing activities?
Because we had a loss, right? So we had negative operating cash flow. We had to put more money into the store, so it's also negative. So you can see here, this is where the money came from.
So we borrowed money. We took out more money on our line of credit. We withdrew $20,000 to help pay for some of those expenses. So our net increase in cash, we actually used cash of $6,800. So how are we going to pay for that shortfall? We have to tap into our cash and our cash account. So we started off the company with $12,000 in cash in our account. The first year we didn't have to touch it because all of our financing activities paid for everything. But in year number two, we have a little bit of a shortfall, so we have to tap into our cash account and use $6,800 to pay for it. So our ending cash balance in our cash account will be $5,200.
Okay. Year three. All right. Year three. All right, this is where the company finally turns a profit. Maybe they had good digital advertising, led to a nice spike in sales. Margin improvement, 43%. So better vendor relationships. Maybe you had pricing power. Maybe you had a benefit there to charge a higher price. Okay.
So your revenues grew again, margins grew, expenses increased. I think you finally started to take salaries as an owner, because in the first 2 years, you're not making much money. You started making money, so you decided, okay, you're gonna take a salary for yourself. So expenses went up a little bit. You have to pay interest expense because we still have that outstanding debt you drew on the line of credit, so we need to pay for that. But we finally reported a net profit of $15,750. So we take a look at our cash flow operating activities. It's positive from our net profit. Again, we add back depreciation. We're still using cash for accounts receivable, so we minus out the accounts receivable and inventory because we constantly have to purchase new inventory. And we add back accounts payable because we're not paying our vendors right away. So that's a source of cash. Now we have in our investing activities, we have proceeds from the sale of property and equipment. So say you, in your store, you have some fixtures that maybe the racks or the shelving, you need to replace them, or you found something better. So you're gonna sell off the old one and you can make money from it, and then you're gonna purchase new type of shelving or racks, or so that's where you would see us proceed from the sale of the equipment, 1,200, and then there's still some purchase for equipment, so money went out of the company to pay for the new equipment. So we used cash for investing activities, but because we had a profit from our operations, we decided we didn't need to draw on our line of credit to help pay for it. And we decided to just tap into our cash to help fund the shortfall.
Actually, they made
Oh,
$950.
oh yeah, sorry. The operating activities covered all of that. So we
Yeah.
actually made cash of $950. So that $950 goes back into your cash account, and your ending cash balance goes up by $950. So you now have $6,000 in your account, 6,150, but still, you're still short that 5,850 from where you started at 12,000. So your cash account still didn't replenish the amount of cash you used. So then we go into year 4.
Was there a question on the chat? Okay. All right, year 4. Year 4, you started really, online sales have improved significantly. So if you notice on the cash flow statement, you were putting less into property and equipment, likely because you didn't need to, especially if you had online sales. Yeah, you're not relying on your brick and mortar, so you reduce your CapEx. Operating expenses declined on a percentage basis because your revenue was so good. And then the owner, what you'll see is they started to pay back their line of credit and then return some money back to the investors.
So basically, because you're making more money, we saw another profitable year. Profit improved from the year before. So we have the positive 56,400. We add back our depreciation, still minusing out accounts receivable and inventory. And then we're adding back the accounts payable. So we have a positive 44,400 for operating activities. We sold some more property and equipment, and we got some money from that, and we purchased other equipment. Maybe it's to help with the online sales or whatnot. So we use money in investing activities, and like Kyle said, we want to start paying back our debt and our investors because we're seeing a profit from our company. So we paid back $3,000 on our line of credit, and we paid back our investors $15,000. So we used money, $18,000 of our cash to pay back our investors and our debt. But our net cash, we actually still have $21,800 in cash, which we add to our cash account. So we're growing our cash a little bit more, and we now have $27,950 in our cash account. And if you look at the bottom, the cumulative cash, now we're actually positive.
Yep.
So we're making more money than what we started off with, because we started off with $12,000. So the company's doing well now.
And that's what's, for entrepreneurs, we give all the credit. Sometimes you have to really stick it out multiple years before you start seeing the fruits of your labor. So to hang out, year 4, I'm just thinking, my gosh, right? You got to wait that long, but that isn't uncommon for businesses that start up. They have to go through some pain for a few years, or they grow up, come out gangbusters, which is awesome. But that, this isn't uncommon. Okay, year 5, you're basically steamrolling it. You're doing good. You're growing revenue. Your margins are improving. You can pay yourself a little bit more money, pay the bank back. And then there's this thing here, taxes. You've graduated to paying taxes now. So notice, I don't know if anybody picked up on this, in year 3, we had a profit, but you didn't pay tax. And that's because realistically, when you think about when you pay that tax, you pay it after your year has already been completed, right? So you're paying taxes on your profit the following period, right? So In 2022, your business made X amount of profit, and then you have to report that profit on your business taxes, or if it flows through on your personal tax return, you're not going to pay that tax till April 15th. So, or as late as possible is what I would do. You never want the government to have their money early, and I never want them to have my money that's refunded to me. So this number is, if I were to hit the cell, right, I'm just assuming 20% of the prior year's net profit. Anyway, that's just, that is what happens in reality when you're paying taxes on the profit of your business. We're not talking like GET that's going to come out more regularly. This is your profit.
So as you can see, year 5 looks similar to year 4, but everything is just growing. Your revenues are growing, expenses are growing. Now your taxes are growing because you're more profitable, so you have to pay more taxes. Same thing going on with depreciation, accounts receivable and inventory, as well as accounts payable. You're still purchasing more equipment or replacing equipment that you currently have, and you're paying back your debt. So if you can see, year 4, we paid back $3,000, and then year 5, we paid back $20,000. So we paid back all the amount that we drew on. So you no longer have any debt after year 5. You still will have your line of credit, but you paid back, so your balance on your line of credit is 0. And then we paid back our investors another $50,000. And then you still have cash after that, and your cash continues to grow. As you can see, your ending cash account is now at $39,320.
Did everyone get this Excel spreadsheet emailed to them, or did they just email you in a PDF?
Just the PDF.
Oh, okay. Would you like the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, we can.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So who is making these decisions? There's a lot of decision making in like, oh, do I replace my equipment this year? Or, I'm deciding to pay myself $10,000 more than last year. Who is this all, this is your choice, or?
It depends. Most times for startups, it's you running the business, unless you hire people to specifically manage certain areas. Like if you hire someone for your store manager might be telling you, hey, we need to purchase more equipment, or some of the equipment we originally purchased is not working, we need to fix it, whatnot. So it depends how you set up your business.
Yeah, so some things are going to be externally driven, where the equipment breaks down and you have no choice.
Right.
You got to replace it. Other things are going to be organic, internally driven, based on what you see, your business acumen, your financial sort of acumen on what's going on within your company, that okay, demand is growing, I need to buy more inventory because I know I'm going to get more sales. I could, sell this and replace it with that. So a lot of this is just really nuanced with what specifically is situational to you. So it is important to understand certain metrics that kind of keep you in line, without getting into the weeds too much. It's, for example, you probably don't want to spend so much money on inventory and then you don't sell anything and then you're stuck with all this inventory, right? So there's a balance there, and most businesses, there are generally, numbers and metrics to kind of help you understand what's the right amount of inventory I should have on hand, right? Or what's the right amount of expenses? What is the margins that are typical for this kind of business in this industry? And you probably don't want to be too far away from those, or you want to be improving and, besting those averages. That's where, because at the bank, when we get a business and they're trying to borrow from us, we're measuring all of their metrics of how they do against industry averages. Like, what's the median here, right? What should their gross margin be? What should their expenses be? And some of that is specific to Hawaii, like we have expensive electricity and expensive rent. So none of that's going to be a surprise. Sometimes they hold more inventory because it takes a while to ship here. So you gotta bulk it. Yes, Vincent.
I have a question. So you said you should compare it to industry averages. Is there any resource or something you could recommend to us to find that kind of information?
Is there anything free? We subscribe to some industries information, so we get some industry averages, but I don't know if there's
It's public.
free ones out there, the ones we use.
Yeah, so there's a RMA, Risk Management Association.
Yeah, but we have a subscription, so I don't know if they provide it for free.
Yeah, you may have to pay IBIS World. There's an industry resource that would have all the metrics for, so you would use the NIAX code, which is a 6-digit code
6 or 7 digit.
that they try to isolate it by industry. So it may not be super specific, depends on what you do. But a NIAX code is what you would use to find out that industry and what those metrics are. Yeah. So this is another, okay, any questions on the cash flow construct? Right, boring. Yeah. So normally when you have your P&L and your balance sheet, it's going to manufacture your cash flow statement. So you're not going to have to put it together. It's going to do it for you. But it's important for you to understand what's going on and all the components in it. So this is another way to present cash flow and some of the concepts we went over. So EBITDA and free cash flow, I put sort of, because it's not exact. So if you see here, this is a presentation of the revenue, expenses. This is your net profit. And then here we're adding back interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. So you get your EBITDA. That's your rough measure of cash flow that we're going to focus on. And then we're going to see all of the other cash expenses. So interest expense, taxes, changes in working capital, capital expenditure is probably the most important one. So this is your quasi free cash flow number here, all in one spreadsheet. So you can see net income, EBITDA, what your free cash flow number is. Now, this is not an exact free cash flow number because it leaves out the line of credit advances and what we pay back to investors, right? So if you're looking at your business and you want to build a model, right, a 10-year model or a 5-year model, right, you have to make some assumptions like, are you going to pay investors back? So normally I probably would not want to show repaying investors back. I want to see all of that cash flow power before paying investors back. And then you can figure that afterwards, right? Okay, what's the possibility to pay them back? And then I remove line of credit advances, even the working capital changes here. You know, that makes this a more exact number, which is, it matters because if you're going to be a fast growing business, you're going to find out real quick, you're not going to have any money to purchase inventory, to float your receivables. So businesses can grow into bankruptcy is what we say, if they're growing too fast and they don't have the capital. So that's why that's important. But for building a model, because is that what you guys have to do for a competition? No? Okay. Well, then you can leave it in there. So we'll get this spreadsheet out to you. LLC, C Corp. So I rarely see a C Corp being formed for small business. That's not.
That'd be for a startup.
Yeah, for a startup, I rarely see that.
Really?
A
Like
C Corp?
Delaware C Corp
Well, I see an LLC, not C Corps.
for startups?
Yeah.
Really?
What is this again?
So it's just when you form your business, you have to sort of pick what type of business entity it is, right? Are you an LLC corporation, a limited liability corporation? So a lot of people use LLCs when they own real estate or when they're going to have assets and they want to shelter that liability in that entity and potentially have that away from the operating company where you're making all the revenues and so forth, right? So say you had your operating business that does revenues, expenses, and so forth, and then you have a real estate asset. Typically what we see for individuals that are intelligently trying to manage liability, they'll have that in an LLC owned separately, and then they'll be leasing the space back to their operating company for that reason, for liability protection. Tax wise, if you have an LLC, you can choose to be taxed at the member level, so at your individual level. So if you're a sole member, right, you can choose to be taxed at your individual tax level. Or if you have multiple members, then multiple members have to be taxed at that level, or it can be taxed at the company level. You can choose that. The reason why C Corp, maybe I don't see it, is because it's not tax efficient. Because if you pay a dividend, there's a tax there. And then the individual also pays a tax on that incoming dividend, so there's double taxation.
So this whole activity is based on, like having an LLC, right?
Was it LLC? Yeah, it was an LLC. So because we had cash taxes, then that means that would imply it's taxed at the company level.
Okay,
Mhm.
and it got investments from who, like?
We didn't specify that. We just said, hey, you raised $200,000 in capital. So we just made a presumption that the founder basically had the money and maybe they got it from family and then they just gave it to her and she started the business. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, tax considerations become very important as you start making money. Yeah, you want to be tax efficient, even for sole proprietors, you know, like individuals that are real estate agents, right? Or they have a business, you know, I don't know how it is for like Uber drivers and whatnot, because they're contracted, right? So they have their vehicle, right? And do they get to depreciate that asset, right, with their revenue? So I don't know. I haven't spent time with an Uber driver asking him all his personal tax situation, but you know, being tax efficient with your expenses and accounting for that depreciation, everything that's afforded to you to minimize tax becomes a big deal. Yeah. And that's what big companies, big companies have teams that specialize in that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
This looks like it's kind of hard to do on your own. Is there anything you can like find online to help you? Like that kind of stuff?
To like build a cash flow model?
Yeah.
Probably.
There might be, I never actually Googled it, but I'm sure there's something out there, but it might. Everything
examples of
Yeah.
They use like a QuickBooks or something like that, or some accounting software or program to help you with that, right? So if you have a business or whatever, I think there might be some subscriptions, but maybe some free ones. I know, like, you know, you can do like, I think QuickBooks is one, maybe more, yeah, or they use that, yeah.
Yeah, that's.
More important than whatever software tool you use is the assumptions you're going to layer in to drive your model, right? I wouldn't mind teaching a modeling class on financial modeling. So you have to be very specific with your revenue assumptions, your gross margin assumptions, your expense assumptions. That is what's ultimately driving the number. I'm sure there's tools out there to help you, you know, dress it up and you know, build it. But yeah, the assumptions and those numbers are going to matter more. And if it's realistic and what's justifying that, that's what ultimately matters. And if you're in a business competition, you know, having to articulate why this margin is X and why this dollar amount goes to Y is really going to matter. And that will appeal to likely the judges, you know, oh, this individual knows and understands the business and why this would unfold the way it does. Or they gave me all the clear reasons rather than just, you know, pulling it out of thin air, which we kind of did for this example. Because there was like a 64% gross margin in year 5. And I was like, yeah, it's not really that great on apparel, you know.
Realistic. We don't need to.
Maybe you had Miss Hawaii endorsing their company and you got the pricing power. Yeah.
I did want to address Alex's question. So this is not designed to build spreadsheets. It's actually quite the opposite, but we are having a workshop this coming Wednesday. It's not part of the UHVC competition. It's just you know, some other guest speakers we have coming in to teach a financial forecasting workshop. So this coming Wednesday, we have 2 guests who are teaching you how to use the software called Sum. It is financial forecasting software. It's designed to help you develop the charts and graphs and things, sort of to the same effect, just without the spreadsheets. So that is not going to be both spreadsheets, but it is going to help you visualize your financial future, more, you know, using visuals like charts and things like that. Everyone who attends that session actually gets a free 1-year subscription to that software. So please also join us on Wednesday for that. Yeah, I know that doesn't quite answer your question about spreadsheets. I don't know about you, but even 6 years ago when I was doing my grad research, I still had to do it the hard way. So I think that's still pretty standard. I hate to say it, but I think you just have to get acquainted with spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are never going to go out of style.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Game time. We can email, you can email this out to the class.
Yeah.
So they can have this spreadsheet.
Of course, yeah, you're comfortable sharing it.
Yeah, it's a fictitious company. It's not on any customer. So. Okay, thank you for asking questions. Any other questions? Thoughts?
Are there any questions on Zoom?
Oh, I did put it, so I wanted to share, as a Manila student, I don't know if this is true for like community college or like UHVC, what's opposite, but Manila students have access to industry reports through the library, so you can access IBIS through the UH Manila library.
Oh,
If you just search UH Manila IBIS, Manila library IBIS, that's what I did, and I got the link, I think on the second link. IBIS is what we use for our industry information. They even have industry reports on certain industries. They'll drill down specifically to, you know, like restaurants, a Japanese restaurant, or, you know, certain industries will go pretty deep. But yeah, it'll give you specifics on different industries.
yeah, if there's a key statistics tab in the IBIS resource, then it'll pull down like financial ratios, even potentially some like cash conversion stuff or cost structure ratios, like how much should be spent for goods versus, you know, labor.
Just things to think about, look into when you're looking at that specific industry, like when they deal with specific to that industry. Those industry reports are pretty good.
Any questions on Zoom?
No.
I think that concludes the session. Thank you. Please give a round of applause.